Chapter 1. Decisions, Decisions, Decisions. Shota stared at the piece of paper on his desk, irritated at how difficult it was to decide the students being paired up. The finals were quickly approaching for everyone involved, and the faculty had made the difficult decision to replace the usual standardized test typically used for the first years for something much more suited to their newfound experiences. In a normal year, the students would be fighting against robots and forced into various scenarios made to test them on every single thing they've learned in the classroom. Except, his class been exposed to the horrible reality many pro-heroes face regularly in their careers. Criminals and villains had attempted to kill them, who hoped to use their deaths as bait to lure All Might out into the open. Their exposure to the real world, while cruel, had allowed the teachers to challenge the first years in his class like none before them. Now, Shota had hit a setback after the faculty decided on the brand new format for his class's final. His dark eyes immediately stared at the piece of paper with his class roster on it. In particular, for names had been the main source of frustration for him. Izuku Midoriya, Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, and Momo Yaoyorozu. These four students had vast potential in each of them, but like any student, they had their flaws holding them back. Izuku Midoriya. Shota could see the raw power being contained within the student's frame. It was almost terrifying to imagine what the boy was able to do when he fully gained control over his quirk. But the problem was his lack of control and his severe confidence issues hindering such progress. Yet, the boy had the odd ability to focus on serious situations and make rational decisions with ease. Along with his immense power, the boy's intelligence was not to be ignored as it seems to rival the others on his list. He already thought about pairing Izuku Midoriya with another student on the list, a boy named Katsuki Bakugo, a fiery and foul-mouthed individual, and someone who gave Shota more problems than any other student in years prior. And, somehow, Shota saw the enormous potential in the boy's instincts and fine-tuned control over his quirk. Shota was well aware of the animosity Bakugo directed towards Izuku, and other students in the class definitely noticed the behavior between them. Originally, he was dead set on throwing these two students into the ring against All Might and forcing them to work together. Now, the pro-hero was still leaning towards that option until he came to the other two students on his list. Shoto Todoroki, the son of Endeavor, Shota, for lack of a better term, didn't give a single shit about the boy being Endeavor's son. In his class, the man treated everyone the same way as he only allowed those with the potential to remain in his class, with no exceptions to his rule. Still, there was no denying the immense talent wielded by Shoto, and anyone could see the young boy was going to go far in his career. The relationship between the three of them could be described using one word: tense. Izuku and Shoto had, for the most part, managed to have a healthy friendship after the destructive battle between them in the sports festival. Most people might assume there weren't any issues between them, but that thought couldn't be farther from the truth as the two boys intended on surpassing the other. While the sports festival may have cleared the air about any potential negative feelings between them, it forced them to respect each other and continue pushing themselves onward. As for Bakugo, he was intent on grinding his classmates into dust. No one was safe from the boy's anger, especially Izuku Midoriya. The timid boy seems to receive the worst treatment from Bakugo, making Shota wonder about their history as they did come from the same school before their acceptance to Udata High. He knew the little tolerance Udata High had for bullies, making it clear individuals who can't behave like a proper hero were not going to be tolerated here. Jesus, these boys can't give me a break. He rubbed his eyes, desperately fighting back the urge to crawl into his precious sleeping bag and get some sleep. It was a Saturday night, and the test was going to start on Monday. Thankfully, the practical portion was not going to be taking place until Wednesday morning and finishing in the mid-afternoon. His eyes landed on the final student. Then there's Ms. Yaoyorozu. Compared to the three boys, Momo lacked the raw power, combat prowess, and sheer talent being used by the others. Some might believe she was at a disadvantage against them, and, truthfully, she wouldn't last long in a fight against such heavy hitters. Yet, there was one thing she held against them, and it had to do with her versatility as well as her intelligence. Those were the two factors that would allow her to stay alive in a fight against them. Now, the problem facing Ms. Yaoyorozu was similar to Izuku Midoriya. Her defeat against Tokoyami had, for lack of a better term, destroyed the confidence once held by the class vice president. Shota saw how much she second-guessed in training scenarios, contemplating if she was making the right choice, and her hero internship only made the situation much worse. Choosing a hero like Iwabami seemed utterly stupid in Shota's eyes, forcing the pro-hero to wonder if he should finally step in and speak with the girl. These finals will either make or break Ms. Yarozu, Shota concluded, knowing how much the girl must be stressed for the practical portion. Students like Izuku, Bakugo, and Shoto most likely focused more on their studies than practical training, as the underground hero can imagine the staff, including himself, struggling to hold back against the power wielded by these three. The only individual he imagined was going to be fine was none other than All Might. When he glanced between the three students, Shota already crossed Bakugo's name from the list. If Bakugo unleashed his anger on Ms. Yaoyorozu, there was no telling how much damage he could do to the girl's already crumbling confidence. It meant only Shoto or Izuku were potential partners for the finals. Shoto, while powerful, didn't seem like the type to work well with others. He knew the boy made some progress when it came to socializing with others after his fight against Izuku. Yet, his progress seems to be thrown to the side for combat training. Shota had seen the boy tune out others and use his overwhelming abilities to win the fight, hardly giving his partner or team a chance to speak their mind. She doesn't need someone to win for her. Ms. Yaoyorozu needs someone to help snap her from whatever funk she's in. Plus, I can already imagine the lively conversations between Shoto and Bakugo during the practical portion. He sighed, crossing Shoto from the list. The pro-hero almost wanted to bang his head against his desk. "Why does Midoriya always seem to enter my crosshairs?" he muttered. Personally, Shota believed the green-haired student can become a great hero. Sure, he didn't always seem to show such confidence in the boy, preferring to point out his mistakes during class. The hero hoped Izuku would learn why he was so tough on him. It was one thing to constantly praise a student's abilities, but to constantly point out their mistakes meant the teacher expected more because they were capable of much more. Izuku went from someone who couldn't fight without breaking his limbs to moving at great speeds like he was a bolt of lightning. He went from terrified by the obstacles standing in his way to someone willing to face those barriers to break through them. Each day, the boy gained more and more control over an immensely powerful quirk. It was only a matter of time until the boy could level a building without hardly any trouble. So it was even more possible to imagine how Shota felt about witnessing the interactions between Izuku and his classmates. The boy retained his timid nature, constantly stuttering, and almost seemed hesitant to add his thoughts on a topic or discussion. Despite his powers, it can't fix whatever had happened to the boy during his previous years before Udata High. My attempt to help Ms. Yaoyorozu build her confidence is to pair her with someone who shares such similar issues. Shota prided himself on being logical. Maybe he placed his faith in Izuku because of his ability to somehow inspire others and help push them past whatever was facing them. It's why Shoto seemed to be able to relax around his classmates following the sports festival, and here he was placing his faith in Izuku to help Momo. The silence in his office was pierced by a heavy sigh. "You better not fail me, kid." Shota entered their names into the system, looking at the bracket created to pair two students against a faculty member. He saw Izuku and Momo were being paired against him, causing the teacher to shake his head. "'Cause I'm not going easy on either of you." 10. Wednesday, the following week. Izuku was relieved to know the written portion of the finals was finally over. The boy felt pressure to pass as the practical element to the finals was going to be something familiar to him and his classmates, but there was a bad feeling in the back of his head. It happened the morning before the USJ attack, the days leading up to his encounter with Stain, and right now. Focus. He shouldn't be thinking about the past. I have to pass, or I can't go to the training camp. Mr. Aizawa had informed the class on Friday about a special camp being held for those who passed the finals. From what they were told, the camp was going to push the students to their absolute limit and test them in ways no one expected. The ninth inheritor didn't need any more motivation to pass, considering the legacy he carried within him. All Might was slowly approaching the end of his career as a hero, and only a few select individuals even knew it was coming. His impending retirement forced Izuku to look for any advantages to help accelerate his training to gain better control over the quirk passed down to him. The boy was expected to take his mentor's place as the symbol of peace and, at some point, bring an end to the man simply known as All for One. Deku. The green-haired boy didn't seem to notice his friend, Ochako Uraraka, calling out to him. At first, the girl believed he was thinking like he usually did before some big exam or training scenario. Letting her curiosity get the better, the brown-haired girl called out to him. Izuku, she said, deciding to use his real name. Ochako was not expecting a response, but it manages to shake him from whatever thoughts were roaming his mind. He spoke up, huh? The ninth inheritor seemed surprised to hear his name. Were you talking to me? He asked, feeling panic and embarrassment flooding into his system. I am so sorry if you were talking to me, Uraraka, he apologized. To his relief, Uraraka smiled at him and shook her head. Nah, I just wanted to see how you're feeling about the test. Everyone is nervous, but you seemed pretty calm right now. Her response was enough to make Izuku feel guilty for misleading his closest friends like Uraraka and Ida. And not really, he immediately replied, hoping to steer the conversation away. I've been, pretty nervous about what we're going to face. Currently, Ochako and Izuku were walking among their classmates to the proposed building being used for the practical portion. Many seemed excited from Izuku's perspective, talking about how they're going to be able to go all out against robots and not worry about hurting anyone. The ninth inheritor thought it would be easier to join everyone's excitement over concerning himself with thoughts regarding his responsibility. He was nervous about the practical portion, suspecting it wasn't going to be as easy as everyone had believed from what Itsuka Kendo had told them. In the distance, Izuku saw the testing site the teachers were going to use to administer the finals. The boy scrunched his eyebrows in confusion as he could see numerous teachers standing just outside the front door. What was the reason for so many teachers? Some definitely didn't teach any classes they took, which made Izuku wonder what was happening. As usual, his brain seems to already formulate a reason. No, could they? Well, it is high. Teachers are able to do whatever they want. Izuku's curiosity morphed into internal panic. The ninth inheritor wasn't the only one questioning their presence as he heard his classmates talking about the teachers. Some like Ishido and Kaminari seemed to be riding on cloud 9, apparently looking forward to going all out on the test against robots. Meanwhile, other classmates like Shoto and Kaken seemed to glance at the teachers and seemed to realize what was happening, he thought. Sure are a lot of teachers here, Jiro pointed out. 5, 6, 8 of them. The invisible girl started counting the teachers. Hakakura agreed with her. You're right. But why are they here? As if answering her question directly, Mr. Aizawa spoke up. For starters, it is possible to fail this exam. So don't think your seat for the training camp is the only thing on the line here. Izuku listened as the teachers, including their principal, began explaining the revised practical exam. Originally, they would have gone against robots like Kendo suggested, if they were in normal class in any other year. The school recognized their experiences against real criminals and villains, deciding they could no longer simply use robots to test students in the hero program. Everyone felt the hairs on the back of their necks rise upon seeing the expression on Mr. Aizawa's face. As such, you students will be pairing up and fighting against the teachers you see standing here today. Against a teacher? Izuku heard Uraraka mutter. Their homeroom teacher kept speaking. Your pairings and assigned teachers have already been decided. Your battle moves, your grades, your friendships with one another. All these factors and more were considered, so without further ado, let's begin. Izuku saw Mr. Aizawa immediately turn towards him. First, Midoriya is with Ms. Yorozu. At that moment, the ninth inheritor thought the world was coming to an end. How did Mr. Aizawa think pairing him and Yaoyorozu was a good idea? Honestly, Izuku had trouble believing he was going to be working with the class vice president, who happens to be a really, really pretty girl. And the worst part was he's never had a single conversation with her during the first few months of school. Izuku wondered if his real quirk was supposed to be bad luck. Chapter 2. Let's get ready to rumble. 1. Midoriya is with Ms. Yaoyorozu. Nearly everyone in Class 1A had been caught off guard by the two students being paired together for the practical exam. Some thought it was unfair for someone as strong as Izuku and as intelligent as Momo to be partners, but others were able to see the reason behind their homeroom teacher's decision to make them partners. One of them was none other than the dual quirk user named Shoto Todoroki. The son of Endeavor understood what their homeroom teacher was thinking when pairing those two for the practical exam. Izuku and Momo had never really interacted with each other throughout the first few months of the year and, in reality, might be their biggest obstacle to taking on Mr. Aizawa for the exam. If those two could manage to work together properly, Shoto can imagine any pro hero, except his opponent, feeling somewhat hesitant about taking them on. Unfortunately, the question was if they were capable of getting past the awkward wall between them. In his short time getting to know Izuku, the dual quirk user had learned just how hesitant his new friend was when it came to speaking with new people. He literally didn't stop apologizing for almost knocking my ass out. Shoto thought his problems were bad, but his friend took it to another level. I hope he can get his act together, because I don't think our teacher was planning on even holding back against them. Shoto should have been speaking with his partner, trying to create any viable strategy to fight All Might and pass, but his partner made it quite clear about his stance on the matter. "Fuck off. I ain't working with you, half and half bastard." The boy rolled his eyes. "Believe me, I don't want to work with some vulgar toddler either." "All right," Mr. Aizawa spoke up, stopping Shoto from making another snappy insult about his partner for today. "You'll have a few minutes to speak with the person you're working with," he informed them, appearing as exhausted as usual. The pro hero didn't say anything more as the teachers walked into the building, leaving the students to follow close behind and speak with each other. As everyone was working things out with their respective partner, Shoto noticed how Izuku and Momo seemed to walk next to each other without saying a word to the other. They even some distance between them, looking unsure about how to approach the other. Honestly, the closest thing to match the situation unfolding before his eyes was whenever kids were getting to know each other for the first time in elementary school. Was he expecting his new friend to make some grand leap in confidence and talk to Momo? Maybe, especially after everything he's seen in the last few weeks. They never spoke to each other during the first weeks of class, ignoring each other's existence. Yet, it changed during the sports festival, where Shoto made his declaration clear to everyone in the room. He was going to win, proving his claim to being the strongest student in the class, but was quickly met with Bakugo and, surprisingly, Izuku rising to his challenge. His battle against Izuku had forced the dual quirk user to respect him and his ability to fight. Above all, Shoto saw how easily the green-haired boy could simply flip a switch and become almost as focused as Bakugo in battle. His respect only reached another level following the incident in Hashu, where he, Izuku, and Ida had battled against the villain known as Stain. It was most likely this incident that created the friendship between them, considering no one was to know about the truth surrounding that night. Shoto sighed. "Geez, I really worry about the guy sometimes, and I've only been friends with him for like what? 2 months." If he and Bakugo weren't going to work together, Shoto knew their chances were almost zero against the number one hero. Now, Shoto had the utmost confidence in his powers against anyone. As for a monster like All Might, yeah, he ain't that stupid. Suddenly, the PA system came to life. "Shoto Todoroki and Katsuki Bakugo, please report to your testing site." Whatever, he came to his decision about the problem facing his friend. Time to help Izuku learn to talk to girls. The dual quirk user approached his friend from behind. "You'll thank me later, buddy." What? Without saying another word, Shoto shoved his new friend towards Momo. He watched as his friend stumbled for a few moments before regaining his balance. It seemed to work as Izuku was less than a foot away from the class vice president, who seemed equally timid about interacting with him. You think if they talked to each other, they might actually be good friends. Shoto crossed his arms over his chest, waiting to see if his attempt to make them interact was working. The heterochromatic teen had one thought running through his head. Life's not fair, but whatever. Let's get this show on the road. 10. A few minutes later. So, I am glad to be working together for the practical exam. Wow. Izuku was not exactly the most talkative person in the world, excluding his famous mutterings, as his friends like to put it. He struggled to talk to normal people, but trying to talk to the prettiest girl in their class was definitely beyond his current power levels. The ninth inheritor needed weeks to realize Uraraka was serious about being friends with him, forcing Izuku to have to interact with the gravity user on a near-daily basis. When it came to his other, unusually attractive, female classmates, Izuku could count just how many times he's spoken to them on one hand. At this point, he suspected One for All was screwing with him. To suddenly have to work with Yaoyorozu was going to take an immense toll on him. Worse, they were facing Mr. Aizawa for the practical exam. Izuku knew the man was not going easy on them, especially after being labeled as the problem child of their class. Meanwhile, Momo was dealing with similar thoughts about the situation facing her. The only thing keeping her mind sane was watching the live feed of Shoto and Katsuki battling against All Might and, to no one's surprise, getting beaten to a bloody pulp. She responded back, sounding equally as nervous as him. Same here. I hope we can get along. When Mr. Aizawa had announced her partner was going to be Izuku Midoriya, Momo was torn between feeling relieved or nervous about the person she has to work with for the practical exam. Momo tried to answer the question but came across a rather serious roadblock about the boy named Izuku Midoriya. She never really interacted much with him throughout the school year, struggling to even remember a time when they actually had spoken to each other for any kind of reason. What little information she does know about her partner either directly came from Ochako during their conversations or observations Momo's made about him throughout the school year. The gravity user even joked about how she doesn't think Midoriya has a single bad bone in his body from everything that's happened. If she knew him better than Momo might have agreed or disagreed with her friend's opinion. Midoriya seems like a genuinely good person, constantly hearing from others about his intelligence as well as his heroic spirit. The closest thing to a negative about him was some people mentioning his timid nature and stuttering around others. Those could be nothing more than, ironically enough, some quirks about him. No one was perfect. Momo glanced around, noticing how easy it was for some of her classmates to speak with their respective partners. If she was being honest, the raven-haired girl envied people like Mina and Toru for being able to get along with others, despite not having spoken to them all too often throughout the school year. I need to focus. Momo needed to pass the practical exam. There was no telling what might happen if she failed today. Just speak with Midoriya and figure out what we're doing. If we minimize how much we need to speak then, things won't get awkward, right? To defeat their homeroom teacher, all they needed to outsmart a man who is used to preparing traps for others. In Momo's mind, she just needed to come up with a plan that will work and they'll pass for sure. No problem, right? Izuku spoke up, catching her attention. Mr. Aizawa is, definitely going to be a tough opponent. What do you think? The raven-haired teen seems to freeze, unsure about what to say to his question. Prior to the sports festival, the creation quirk user might have easily answered his question with a dozen facts. But the recent set of failures she's experienced felt akin to a bucket of ice water being poured on her. Momo tried to answer his question. Well, his quirk might make things tough. Momo answered, trying her best to seem confident. He might go after you. I doubt he's going to pay attention to, you know me. Me? Izuku raised a brow at her answer. Why me? Midoriya. Momo was baffled by his seemingly innocent question. You can bring down an entire building. I think Mr. Aizawa might prioritize you over, well, someone like me. The green-haired boy wanted to dispute her response, but time seems to be against them. Soon, the PA system had come to life, catching everyone's attention once. Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki have failed the exam. The next group is Momo Yaoyorozu and Izuku Midoriya. Please report to your testing site. The two immediately tensed up, knowing they had nothing planned against their teacher. What little time they had to figure something out had been wasted. Izuku curled his fist, frustrated at his timid nature getting the best of him. He wanted to get along with the class vice president and work together to pass their practical exam. Except, the boy was more caught up on her last few words than anything else. Compared to you, I'm useless. Those were the words he wanted to say to Yaoyorozu. He may have never spoken to the creation quirk user, but Izuku knew there was a reason as to why she was a recommended student. The girl possessed an incredible quirk, more intelligent than everyone in their class, and seemed like a good person despite coming from a wealthy background from what he heard from those who knew her. People might say she had no reason for feeling inadequate or suffering from any problems. Yet, there was something more about her words that seemed eerily familiar to him. Do you think someone without a Q quirk can become a hero like you? Desperation, hopelessness, frustration. Izuku came to know these emotions more intimately than any lover, a result of him living with them ever since he was just a young child. It's why he realized Yaoyorozu was trying to overcome the same personal demons plaguing his nightmares every night, hoping to see him fail in his journey to becoming a hero. The ninth inheritor curled his fist, watching as a younger version of himself walking alongside his partner. He's trying to become a hero? What a fucking idiot. God, I feel bad for his mom, having to raise a freak like him. You data high? This dumbass has got to be kidding, right? No, I'm afraid you'll never develop a quirk. Should just kill himself. Might make things easier for his mom. I know a way to get a quirk. First, you just take a swan dive off the roof. Then, if you're lucky, you might get one in another lifetime. Deku. I refuse for anyone to feel like that. Izuku knew people might have called him crazy for wanting to help someone facing issues similar to him. There was a reason why he dreamed about becoming a hero. No one should ever have to experience what I went through, not in my lifetime. 10. Around the same time. So why did you decide to change the final two pairings? Toshinori recalled how much Shota talked about throwing his successor and Bakugo into the ring against him for the practical exam. He suspected it had something to do with their poor relationship. The man always seemed intent on forcing them to resolve their issues, but something must have happened in the last few days for him to change his mind. If there was one thing Toshinori learned about Shota, he never liked to change his mind about anything, especially when it came to the matters of the classroom. Shota remained quiet, ignoring the number one hero's question. His silence was met with a sigh from Toshinori, knowing the underground hero never liked answering questions about why he did things or anything coming from him for that matter. In school, Toshinori had to deal with Shota always taking every opportunity to criticize his teaching methods and his obvious favoritism towards Izuku Midoriya. The last one couldn't be argued against because of the matters surrounding One for All. Still, the man wished Shota would be a bit more willing to share his thoughts. It's not like Toshinori was going to use them or anything. He just wanted to know what made someone like Shota change his mind right before the final exam. Teachers never liked making any last-minute changes if there was a major exam on the horizon. None was bigger than the finals for many students and faculty members. At the very least, mine is over. Toshinori was still recovering from the battle against Shoto Todoroki and Katsuki Bakugo. He knew those two were powerful, but facing off against them was something else entirely. The man was still able to beat them into submission. On the flip side, Toshinori needed to dig deep and finish the fight because he could tell his limit was being reached. He subconsciously laid a hand against his injury suffered from his battle against All for One. Toshinori smiled ruefully. God, I am getting too old for this shit. Maybe she was right about me. Shouldn't you see recovery, girl? Toshinori raised a brow at his coworker's concern for him. It's not rational to hide the pain from her. The old lady likes to go overboard with those who aren't truthful with her. The number hero waved him off. It's not pain. Just a few memories about the night he battled against the monster who killed all previous 8 wielders of One for All. Remembering a few things. Shota didn't seem too convinced. Whatever. It's your problem if the old lady starts smacking you around with her cane. I'll be fine, Toshinori replied. As the two walked down the hallway, they reached an intersection. Toshinori was heading for the room given to the teachers who finished taking part in the practical exam, hoping to enjoy some peace and quiet before the others arrive. He was about to say something to Shota until the man said something to him. Izuku Midoriya. Sometimes, I don't understand your favoritism towards him, the underground hero stated, catching the number one hero's attention. He's reckless, emotional, and stubborn. Toshinori remained quiet, unsure of where the man was heading with this. The usually exhausted pro-hero turned his head, a serious look in his eyes. He better prove why he's earned the attention of a titan like you, Shota said, looking more focused than Tashinori had ever seen him. Cause I'm risking a lot by partnering him with Ms. Yaoyorozu. Without saying another word, Tashinori watched as Shota walked down the hallway with his hands in his pocket. In his mind, the eighth inheritor of One for All knew his successor was being watched carefully by his homeroom teacher, possibly more than ever. He's risking a lot by partnering young Midoriya and Miss Yaoyorozu. Chapter 3. Let's get ready to rumble. 2. After being called down to their testing site via the PA system, Momo and Izuku had been walking in silence ever since the brief exchange of words they shared in the main lobby. Both tried to muster the courage to break the awkwardness between them, but neither seems to know the right words. They worried it might affect their performance in the matchup against Mr. Aizawa if they didn't resolve it before the test started. Yet, they had been focused on two very different things that came out of their pathetic conversation. Capture or escape? Momo tried everything to come up with a plan, hoping it would be good enough to work on their homeroom teacher and pass. I mean, we could try trapping him, but he might be able to find a way out. He's no stranger to being in dangerous situations. And maybe there's a way to catch him off guard. Or it should. I don't know. I have no idea why I'm even trying anymore. The raven-haired girl grew more and more frustrated at the prospect of fighting an opponent like Mr. Aizawa, a person who didn't rely on working with others, preferring to work alone than anything else. His experience could easily help him see through her attempts to trap him or lure him into a situation where her partner could have an advantage in a fight. It didn't help knowing how proficient he was in combat after witnessing him fighting criminals and villains during the USJ attack. Despite fighting individuals who might not be affected by his quirk, the man was still able to beat his opponents without too much trouble. Combined with his capture scarf, the creation quirk user quickly understood the man they were facing was more than capable of ending a fight between them in less than a minute. Losing to Mr. Aizawa meant defeat. I can't lose anymore. I just can't. Momo had gotten sick and tired of losing. She lost at the sports festival without putting up a fight against her opponent. Her decision to select Iwabami for the hero internship had been a mistake. The woman specialized in search and rescue, which was the complete opposite of what Momo needed to learn. Everything had taken a turn for the worse, and her confidence had crumbled by each and every single failure she's experienced in the last few weeks. Disappointed at how little she learned from a real pro hero. Frustrated by the inability to make a simple decision in the middle of battle. Worse, Momo had to remember the situation taking place at home. They say failure is supposed to be the greatest teacher in life. Unfortunately, Momo can't see what lesson she should be taking away from the misery she's suffered from the last 2 months. The only thing she can say is today was going to be the make or break moment, regardless of the raven-haired girl was willing to admit it or not. There was no telling what might happen if she fails the exam. Momo recalled how much she was stressing over the finals, particularly over the practical exam. She spent countless hours thinking about what their teachers might throw at them, options ranging from killer robots to possibly simulating a major disaster to make everyone work together. Looking back on them, the raven-haired girl would have preferred any of those options than what the teachers had chosen for them. To be paired with another classmate and forced to either capture or escape their opponent to pass the exam was concerning, to say the least. It meant she was truly going to have to think on her feet as the person facing her, and Midoriya was none other than their homeroom teacher, Mr. Aizawa. Only a single thought came to her mind. Can I do this? If she was being honest with herself, the raven-haired girl had begun doubting her ability to pass the exam. Words like useless, stupid, and even deadweight came to mind. A part of her believed Midoriya might come to see how just useless she was in battle and leave her behind. Momo wouldn't blame her classmate for leaving behind an idiot girl trying to play hero, using it as an excuse to escape the life being forced upon her at home. Why Yaoyorozu? The girl heard the familiar voice of Izuku Midoriya. Yes? We should, you know. He rubbed the back of his head, a tinge of red on his cheeks. Make a plan to go up A against Mr. Aizawa. Yeah, she nodded, agreeing with her partner. You're right. Momo was doing everything possible to throw everyone off the trail, even the person she considered her best friend in Kyoka. She didn't want to bother anyone with her problems, especially when taking into consideration her status as a recommended student. The expectations it placed on her shoulders hadn't helped the situation and, in all honesty, was making it worse for her. As the raven-haired girl continued to walk alongside her partner, whose expression slowly changed from nervous to calm, what Momo hadn't realized was Izuku had seen through her act. After all, he was probably the only person who could truly understand the feelings running rampant in her head right now. I feel so stupid. Izuku recalled the expression on Yaoyorozu's face on the day she lost to Tokoyami. And maybe I could have done or said something. Anything to help Yaoyorozu cheer up after her match. But would she have accepted help from me? We hardly know each other. Plus, the girls all seem to be there for her. I probably would have come off as a weird to them. Izuku realized those were just excuses, trying to use his personal problems to justify why he didn't even make an attempt to speak to her. The class vice president needed someone capable of helping her, not a person who struggled to solve their problems. Yet, the boy came to a single line. Meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. The ninth inheritor was willing to save his friend from being killed by Stain, willing to put his body on the line against Shigaraki to help All Might, and willing to take on the responsibility of becoming the next symbol of peace. Everything he's accomplished in his short time since attending Udata High would be for nothing if the boy was unable to extend a helping hand to someone in need of it. Great, I can fight a villain like Stain, but I can't find the resolve to talk to a classmate needing some help from anyone. Izuku thought if he could gather the courage to fight someone like Stain, then what was stopping him from trying to help Yaoyorozu? Midoriya? He immediately replied, "Why yes." "Are you okay?" she asked him, tilting her head in confusion. What? I am fine." Momo didn't seem too convinced by his response. She looked away, noticing the door to their testing site was less than a few feet away from them. It seemed rather ordinary, which only made the creation quirk user more nervous about what was lying on the other side. Momo felt as if her entire future was depending on what happens beyond these doors. The sheer thought about what may happen today made her feel a sense of unease in the pit of her stomach. The raven-haired girl glanced at her partner. "Do you think we can beat Mr. Aizawa?" "Yes." For a moment, Momo's eyes widened at the unexpected word coming from Midoriya's mouth. The nervous expression on his face had seemingly disappeared, instead only to be replaced by a look of unwavering determination. His green eyes stared into her onyx-colored eyes, making the girl almost flinch at the force behind the look. She tried to respond, only for her brain to fail to come up with anything. As if detecting her surprise at his sudden shift in personality, Izuku's intense expression slowly reverted into a sheepish smile. Sorry," he quickly apologized, scratching his cheek. "I wasn't trying to, scare you or anything." "No, I understand. I'm just surprised by your answer." Izuku did not blame Yaoyorozu for responding in such a manner. Heck, he thought anyone would be shocked to hear his answer. They might have thought he was being crazy or overconfident for thinking they could defeat a pro hero as experienced as Mr. Aizawa. Suddenly, the PA system came to life once more. The matchup of Izuku Midoriya and Momo Yaoyorozu against Shota Aizawa will commence in 1 minute. Students, please prepare yourselves for the exam. The creation quirk user spoke up. "I know this sounds strange, but can I ask you for a favor?" Izuku nodded. What is it?" "Please don't hesitate to leave me behind if there's a chance to pass." As if fate hated Izuku, something he blamed one for all, the doors to their testing site began to open before their very eyes. When thinking about their predicament, Izuku realized there was no plan, no real communication between them, and each was dealing with their personal problems right now. Only one thing could describe the situation facing him and his partner. "We're so screwed, aren't we?" His question went unanswered from whatever religious figures existed in the world, earning a silent scoff from him. "Guess that answers my question." 10. Around the same time, "I wonder how Deku and Momo are going to do against Mr. Aizawa," Ochako thought out loud, curious about how her friends were going to perform in their matchup. The gravity quirk user noticed how awkward things had become between those two, especially knowing how much her friend struggled to make conversation with others. She already went through the arduous process of getting him to talk to her and realized they were friends, and that meant talking to each other. Now, he was being forced to interact with the class vice president and work together. Ochako could see two things happening during their match. Either Deku and Momo overcome the awkwardness hanging around them, or they suffer horribly at the hands of their teacher. Either way, the match was definitely going to be a highlight for those remaining in the main lobby. It ain't my problem, half and half bastard. You're the reason why we fucking failed. Ochako cringed at the fury behind those words. She looked towards the common scene of Katsuki yelling at someone, who happened to be his partner for the practical exam. Like her other classmates, Ochako had been surprised to hear Mr. Izawa announce them as partners, but even worse was finding out their opponent for the exam. She shuddered at the thought of fighting All Might. I get why criminals fear him now. He's really, really scary when he wants to be. To hear they failed against All Might was not exactly the most surprising news in the world. She was more caught off guard by their homeroom teacher assigning Momo and Deku as a pair than their loss to the #1 hero in Japan. As she thought about her friend's current roadblock, Ochako heard someone walking up behind her. When Ochako glanced towards the source, the girl was surprised to see it was Shoto, who looked a bit worse for wear after his fight with All Might and Katsuki. The gravity quirk user had spoken to Shoto a few times throughout the school year. Although, she'll admit his declaration as being the strongest student during the sports festival certainly didn't sit right with her, but he didn't possess the same arrogance as Katsuki displayed during the festival. Plus, the fight between Shoto and Deku was intense, but even to this day, no one really knows what happened that allowed them to become friends. Everyone, including her, assumed they would hate each other after the festival. To their surprise, it was the opposite as they had actually spoken to each other and generally seemed to be behaving more like friends than bitter rivals. Something Ochako greatly appreciated from the dual quirk user, knowing it was tough for Deku to make friends with the others in the class. Hey. Ochako awkwardly greeted the heterochromatic-eyed teen. He turned his head towards her. Why are you acting like I'm going to bite your head off? Shoto's question came from left field, making Ochako's eyes widen in shock. What? She asked him, unsure of how to respond to him. I'm not our resident hothead, Uraraka. He had been trying, somewhat, to let people know he wasn't like Bakugo when it came to speaking with other people. Or, anymore at least. The gravity quirk user could only manage a single response. What? She cleared her throat. You, never talked to me before. He raised a brow, and, is that a crime? Ochako shook her head. And no, it's just you never really talked to anyone in the class. Usually, Deku is the only one I've seen you talk with since the sports festival. Well, I am trying to interact with our classmates more often. His answer only seems to confuse her even more. Ochako spoke up. Why though? Blame our mutual friend. The dry tone behind his answer made her smile in amusement at his attempt to be funny. He said it would be a good idea to start talking to you and Ida. It didn't matter if he was standing next to them or on the other side of a monitor, Deku was always making an impact on people's lives. Does sound like something Deku would say. Ochako giggled, agreeing with Todoroki about their friend's willingness to help others. As Shoto was about to say something back, one of the larger screens in the main lobby came to life with Izuku and Momo on it. Both had very different expressions on their faces. Almost anyone could tell something must have happened between them, but Shoto already saw it wasn't exactly what he had in mind. That idiot. Shoto resisted the urge to facepalm. They're going to fail at this rate. 10. Back with Momo and Izuku. Yeah, I was right about us being screwed, Izuku muttered to himself. The ninth inheritor expected the testing site to be a room designed to challenge them as students. He thought it was going to be up close and personal with Mr. Izawa. What he didn't expect was a small city filled with houses, apartment complexes, and shops to mimic a densely packed urban center. The young boy already tried to imagine the best possible ways to travel using the roads and alleys, but he had to remember there was someone next to him. Izuku glanced over at Yaoyorozu, noticing how she seemed nervous about what was about to happen. A part of him didn't blame her for acting so hesitant towards the scene before them. The silence was soon ripped to pieces by a buzzer going off in the distance, letting them know the test had begun. Yaoyorozu. He called out to the creation quirk user. We should try to find the exit. It should be our best bet for passing the exam. Izuku had come to learn something about himself during the first weeks of class. He was no leader. Sure, he was more than willing to risk his life for others, but to be held responsible for others like Ida and Yaoyorozu terrified him. Honestly, it was the big reason why Izuku passed on the responsibility to Ida after the incident where the media got on school grounds. Unfortunately, Yaoyorozu was not in the right mindset to act like her usual self. The only sign to let him know she was listening was a simple nod from the raven-haired girl. She's only going to get worse, he realized, deciding to scan their surroundings. He knew Mr. Aizawa was the type of hero to research his target as much as possible. The man needed to know as much information because it could mean the difference between life and death. Izuku knew the man was going to treat the test as if it was a real situation for him, which only meant escaping was the only real thing they could do. Fighting Mr. Aizawa was not something the doctor recommended, especially knowing his quirk was going to be a serious problem for them. He relied on being quick and agile, which helped keep him alive during his encounter with Stain in Hosa City, and to fight someone who could take it away was scary to him. Why you can bring down an entire building? I think Mr. Aizawa might prioritize you over, well, someone like me. He thought Yaoyorozu was giving him more credit than he deserves. The person Mr. Aizawa should be worried about the person standing next to him. Super strength was not exactly the most versatile power in the world, and it was definitely a weakness Izuku was going to have to address at some point in the near future. For now, they had a 15-minute window to either fight or escape. 10. Back with Ochako and Shoto. Do you think they're going to pass, Todoroki? The dual quirk thought Ochako's question, watching as his two classmates began traveling through the city without saying much to the other. In his mind, Shoto assumed they wouldn't last more than a few minutes against Mr. Aizawa if they kept acting so timid around the other person. Some might think he was being harsh or an asshole, but the real world was not so forgiving about those not willing to work together, even if there were no negative feelings between them. He sighed. If they keep trying to avoid stepping on toes, then no. Unless something happens in the next few minutes, Izuku and Momo aren't going to pass the exam. Ochako remained silent after hearing his personal opinion. A part of her did agree with what he was saying. Her time with a pro hero like Gunhead showed her a lot of things, including what happens when hesitating gets in the way. Their line of work involved danger at every corner, regardless if she was trying to clear some rubble for emergency personnel or forced to fight a villain. She looked at the monitor. I guess you have a point. I know it sounds like I'm being an asshole, Shoto responded, hearing the melancholic tone behind her words. Trust me, I blame my old man for why I sound like one. As for Izuku, he should know what hesitating means in the real world. Huh. Ochako turned towards Shoto, noticing a strange expression on his face. Shoto glanced at her. The night when we had met Stain. Oh, the gravity quirk user had no words to use. It was fairly common to everyone in the class about the incident surrounding Deku, Shoto, and Tenya, a night when they encountered the hero killer known as Stain. Thankfully, Endeavor was nearby and managed to take down the villain before anyone died. The three boys were injured to different degrees, especially Tenya. His arm apparently suffered some serious damage from the fight and would need surgery to fix whatever happened to it. Beyond those pieces of information, no one really knew what happened that night. Deku and Tenya hardly spoke about their deadly encounter. She didn't push the issue because it was definitely not something to be taken lightly or force them to talk about something as terrifying as fighting someone wanting to kill them. The same thought applied to Shoto. Neither has told you about that night, have they? The dual quirk user asked her. She gently shook her head. No, and I don't plan on asking them. Or you. He snorted. Looks like Izuku wasn't lying. Lying? Izuku, Ochako replied, almost unable to resist the urge to giggle. He couldn't lie to save his life. A very true statement, Shoto agreed with her. The two were about to keep watching their friends match up until the PA system came to life. Ochako Uraraka and Yuga Aoyama, report to your testing site. When she heard her name being called, Ochako felt an uneasy feeling in her stomach about their exam. Someone as talented as Shoto already failed, which showed how hard the teachers were going on them. It was enough to make Ochako nervous about the entire thing, especially knowing her partner was not the most useful person in the world. Not that she had nothing against Yuga. Nervous, huh? Ochako tried her best to play it off. Nervous. No, I'm perfectly fine. Despite how much the girl was trying to make him think she was fine, Shoto could see how the anxiety on her face. He promised his mother and Izuku about making an effort to talk to people. It looks like he was being given his first chance to help someone out. Let's hope this doesn't backfire on me. Shoto had learned one thing from his father. A way to help him keep his nerves, especially after first learning to use his quirks. It wasn't exactly the easiest thing in the world learning to control two elements like ice and fire without causing damage to the house. Uraraka. Why yes. He glanced over at the screen, seeing the face of Izuku as they just encountered their homeroom teacher. Afterward, the dual quirk user looked back at Ochako. I need to ask. He took a moment to breathe before finally speaking. Are you willing to trust me? The girl seemed surprised by his rather abrupt question. Ochako didn't really know how to answer question. Truthfully, today has been the first real conversation they've had during the entire school year. But he hasn't really done anything to prove otherwise. She sighed. I guess. What? Just hold your hands together like this. She watched as he reached out and grabbed her hands, pulling them towards him. The gravity quirk user could see how much her hands were shaking. Okay, she said, wondering what he was going to do. What now? Shoto didn't say another word as he, without so much as a warning, slapped his hands on top of hers. The force behind the hit made Ochako yelp in pain. Ow. The girl was about ready to knock him out until he spoke up. Feeling better? What? Shoto pointed at her hands. They're not shaking, are they? Looking down at her hands, Ochako realized he had a point. Aside from the stinging sensation, there was no shaking or anything resembling nervousness. Heck, she seems to be focused on the pain more than anything else. Probably the only useful thing I've learned from my old man, Shoto said, hoping he hadn't crossed a line with doing something like that to Ochako. The only thing is you need another person to make it work. Hope I didn't scare you or anything. No, I am fine, she told him, unsure about what just happened. I'm wondering why you helped me out. The dual quirk user shrugged his shoulders and did his best to smile, which was odd for him. You seemed nervous about your exam. I thought I could help ease your nerves about facing 13. Isn't she supposed your favorite hero? I remember Izuku mentioning something about it to me. Ochako had never seen Shoto smile since coming to Udata High, nor has she ever blushed at a boy smiling at her. Chapter 4, Cat and Mouse. So it begins. Shota heard the buzzer ringing in the distance. The underground pro hero knew today was going to challenge his students in ways they've never been tested before. For students such as Izuku Midoriya and Momo Yaoyorozu, the homeroom teacher was forcing those two to face the demons haunting them and, hopefully, come to grips with them. He wanted to understand something about the real world. There was no room for error in a profession where people's lives are on the line. The pro hero let out a soft sigh before putting on the specially made goggles for his eyes. Shota let out a small hiss of pain when they made contact with his face. Shit, looks like my eyes aren't fully healed from then. After the incident at the USJ, Shota was still dealing with the aftermath of his injuries from the insanely strong monster working for the villains. His quirk already suffered from the unfortunate weakness of deactivating whenever he blinked, but now, it's become even worse for him as using his ability tended to put more strain on his eyes. He's hardly gotten a chance to use his powers in any meaningful capacity following the incident. Not only were the students going to be tested in ways they've never experienced before, but the teachers were given the chance to help facilitate their growth by throwing the proverbial kitchen sink at them. In a somewhat limited capacity, despite Shota claiming it was only going to hinder them. Although, individuals like 13 and All Might did bring up good points about how some of them could easily defeat the students assigned to them. It would be cruel and unusual punishment for students like Bakugo, Todoroki, and others to go against individuals as powerful as All Might without any form of handicap. These painful truths forced Shota to reluctantly agree with his coworkers, which was the main reason as to why he and the others agreed to wear the heavyweights on their wrist and ankles. Shota could feel a certain weight to arms whenever he attempted to lift them. Jesus, Power Loader couldn't have asked the damn girl to hold back when making these things. If he was going to have this much trouble lifting his arms, the man was not exactly keen on finding out how much his movement was limited by them. Granted, Shota had to train harder than most because his quirk only worked on emitter types and transformation types, meaning he still needed to be strong enough to take down his opponents even if their quirk was neutralized. The underground pro hero walked towards the edge of the roof, already thinking about the possible choices his students were going to make in their situation. As he neared the edge, Shota knew Izuku and Momo didn't hate each other, but neither liked the other in any meaningful way. They'd probably want to take the least painful and awkward road to pass the exam, and that would mean one thing. So they're forcing me to play this stupid game, Shota muttered, glancing down into the alley below him. He lightly shook his head in annoyance. And they wonder why I hate irrational people. The man didn't say anything more as he simply took a step off the roof, preparing himself for what was going to be a long day. 10. Back with Izuku and Momo. Izuku had one thought about the uncomfortable atmosphere hanging over him and Yaoyorozu. Can we, talk about anything or something? Please. He fully accepted the reality surrounding his inability to converse with other people like his fellow classmates, but the young hero in training thought the situation with his partner was absurd, even by his standards. In the last few minutes, the only words they've exchanged since the test started was discussing a plan to pass the practical exam. Their plan was quite straightforward: find their way to the exit and limit contact with Mr. Aizawa. Most people might have thought it would be a back-and-forth conversation, but Izuku dreamed about such a thing happening. No, their conversation consisted of a few spoken words and mostly nodding. Izuku knew the lack of communication was going to come back and bite them in the ass, especially if they encountered Mr. Aizawa before reaching the exit. The situation was made even worse after Yaoyorozu suggested they use the alleyways to travel through the faux city, saying it might minimize the chances of running into their homeroom teacher. I doubt Mr. Aizawa is going to, forget about the, alleyways. Izuku wanted to voice his concerns over her decision, but the ninth inheritor didn't have a better idea as to what they could do. After agreeing with her suggestion, the two heroes in training were currently walking down an alley in total silence. Both kept an eye out for anything out of the ordinary, knowing how easily their teacher could appear from nowhere and strike. It reminded him of an old comic he read from the days before quirks were a thing in their society. Izuku held back a snort. When you think about it, he sounds a lot like Batman. The ninth inheritor would have preferred using his newfound speed and agility associated with full cowling to scout ahead. Unfortunately, the only downside to his new form was the signature green lightning whenever he activated it. It might be enough to let Mr. Aizawa find them, especially since Izuku had remembered reading a few things about their homeroom teacher's career as a pro hero. It made Izuku realize his only advantage against Mr. Aizawa was to constantly stay on the move, or he was basically useless to Yaoyorozu unless they could neutralize their teacher's sight. Besides his brain doing everything in its power to keep from going mad, Izuku had also been staying a few steps behind Yaoyorozu on purpose. The green-haired boy didn't want to embarrass himself in front of the prettiest girl in their class, and probably the whole grade. Izuku knew most guys in his grade, possibly even second and third years, would be jealous of him being partners with a girl like Momo Yaoyorozu for the finals. When it came to his raven-haired partner, a few traits immediately came to mind about her. Things like beautiful, intelligent, kind, and many other such words would make anyone willing to try their luck with someone like her. He shook his head, but that doesn't mean she's above us. Even Yaoyorozu has problems like the rest of us. While Izuku wanted to pass the finals like anyone else, he couldn't stop his mind from thinking about different ways of helping Yaoyorozu. Talking to her was quite honestly the simplest way, but Izuku had to remember his crippling anxiety when it came to speaking to other people. Uraraka and Ida were his friends, people he could trust after realizing they weren't going to betray him or make fun of him like those during middle school. Now, he had to be the one to reach out to Yaoyorozu. Much like his friends had done for him, Izuku felt compelled to extend a hand to the wonder girl of their class. "Why, Yaoyorozu?" Izuku softly called out to her. His raven-haired partner glanced back at him. "Yes." Izuku realized he hadn't thought about what he was going to say to her. The ninth inheritor tried saying anything, but no words seemed to come out of his mouth. It was enough to draw some concern from the girl standing a few feet away from him. She tilted her head. "Midoriya, are you sure you're all right? You've been acting strange since the test began." "Why, yes, I just wanted to say that. If why you ever need to, talk to someone. I, I'm here." Izuku tried his best to refrain from stuttering and, as usual, failing. Honestly, he couldn't believe the words coming from his mouth. "What? Huh?" Izuku heard the confusion behind her tone, making him realize he forgot something very important about the situation happening. Yaoyorozu was unaware of him suspecting the problems plaguing her. And never mind, Yaoyorozu." Izuku blushed in embarrassment, desperately searching for an answer to salvage the awkward atmosphere between them. "I meant about ideas to, use against him, Mr. Aizawa." "Oh." When the ninth inheritor heard her response, he started to panic even more than before. "I, didn't mean anything by those words. You don't need to take what I said as seriously." He was hoping his poor attempt at an excuse would convince his partner, but he was really doubting it. As the young boy silently prayed to the former wielders of One for All to save his sorry ass from what may happen in the next few moments, Izuku failed to realize his partner was going through her own personal turmoil. Does Midoriya suspect something? Momo furrowed her brow, feeling the sudden rise of panic at the thought of a classmate finding out about her problems. There's no way he caught on, right? I mean, we've hardly spoken to each other, even after being made partners. And maybe I'm just being paranoid about anyone finding out. Although, Momo couldn't help but wonder as to where Midoriya got the idea about something being wrong with her. The raven-haired girl looked back on her previous actions since the sports festival, curious as to where she might have let something slip through the crack. The sports festival? No, he might have said something back then. She kept thinking, but nothing seems to come to mind. And I don't remember saying anything strange in class nor Kyoka or the other girls. So, where did he get the idea something was wrong? As Momo continued to retrace her steps from the past few weeks, she failed to realize her partner had been softly calling out to her. Yaoyorozu. No response. Vice President. Different name. No response. Izuku was getting nervous about her sudden silence, making him wonder if he said something to upset the class vice president. The ninth inheritor feared it might have had something to do with his previous words about her being able to talk to him. That was the only thing Izuku could suspect as the reason behind the radio silence between them, and it was making him quite nervous. There is another way to get her attention. Izuku blushed at the stray thought entering his brain. A part of him almost wanted to strangle his brain for even suggesting such a thing. See, calling Yaoyorozu by her first name? Why am I being put into this situation? Personally, Izuku didn't like calling anyone by their name. He thought it was more polite to refer to others by their last name and avoid stepping on any toes, despite how many times his classmates tell him otherwise. In fact, the only person he called by their first was Shoto, and that was only because his new friend preferred being called his first name. He felt the anxiety building up inside him, which was probably due to several reasons. The biggest he suspected was because it was the prettiest girl in the grade. Izuku already had issues when it came to interacting with other people, but women? The ninth inheritor was hopeless. Not even Uraraka was spared from his crippling anxiety. I am not going to go anywhere if I don't try. As Izuku was about to open his mouth, the green-haired boy suddenly felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He was about to look up when he heard a very familiar and terrifying voice coming from above the alleyway. Looks like I still have irrational students in my class. 10. Back with Shota. Shota had spent the first few minutes of the exam searching for the two young heroes in training, suspecting they might have decided to use the alleys to travel. It wouldn't be the worst choice in the world, but for someone who's used to fighting criminals in the dead of night and in tight spaces, They would have been better off failing the exam than making such a poor decision. So when he landed on a nearby rooftop, the underground pro hero heard the sounds of voices coming from the nearby alley. And they wonder why I hate irrational people. It was the first thing he thought when peering down into the alley and seeing the two students seemingly struggling to communicate with the other. Shota wanted to roll his eyes at the behavior between Izuku Midoriya and Momo Yaoyorozu. They were supposed to be working as a team in hopes of either capturing him, a very doubtful outcome, or make their escape to the exit on the other side of the foe city. Either way, his two better students should have tried to overcome their shortcomings to pass the exam. But the underground pro hero may have made a mistake in putting these two on the same team. Others may have thought it would be a mistake to put two highly capable students on the same team. Now, Shota may have agreed with them if Midoriya and Yaoyorozu were able to work together. That was not the case from what he was seeing. He shook his head. Looks I will be having that talk with Ms. Yaoyorozu. After all, he muttered. The underground pro hero then spoke up, catching their attention. It seems I still have some irrational students in my class. As expected, the two students froze in fear after hearing the familiar gruff voice of their homeroom teacher. Shota didn't give them a chance to react as he immediately jumped down and, using his capture scarf to slow him down, landed between the two students. Need to take Midoriya out of the fight. Shota wasn't an idiot as to why Toshinori took a liking to Midoriya. They shared similar powers, especially when it came to the destructive potential behind their respective powers. Logically, it made sense for the number one hero to help with Midoriya's growth, but there was something more to the obvious favoritism being put on display by Toshinori. Shota always wanted to see what was special about the green-haired student with his own eyes, and such an opportunity was presenting itself to him. Now, the pro hero would never keep his back to an opponent like Ms. Yaoyorozu, but one glance was enough to let him see the hesitation on her face. It still looks as if she doesn't know what choice to make in this situation. His other opponent. At the very least, Midoriya knows how to react accordingly. Shota never liked praising his students, thinking it would only serve to feed their ego. Although he doubted Izuku Midoriya was the kind of person who had an ego, especially considering the situations the boy has thrown himself into during these first few months. The pro hero couldn't hide the smirk when seeing the familiar green lightning surrounding the student's body. Let's see what All Might's favorite can do. Shota never liked taking anything personally, but maybe he was willing to make an exception for today. Before he could use his quirk on Izuku, the green-haired student didn't give him a chance as he quickly left his vision. Smart idea, kid. Shota had seen villains attempt the same thing against him throughout his career, thinking they could simply remain out of his vision to avoid the effects of his quirk. Like everyone else, they eventually tire themselves out. But you're not the first one to do it, nor will you be the last. 10. Back with Izuku and Momo. Great. I was right about him going tougher on us because of me. Izuku knew the key to surviving against his homeroom teacher was constantly staying on the move. All it was going to take was one look from his teacher, and his quirk would be unavailable to him until the man blinked or looked away from him. Those brief moments were going to be crucial for him. Although, Izuku won't lie about one thing when it came to his plan to stay on the move. He could feel his muscles already starting to tire themselves out from remaining in constant use. To others, Izuku might look like an electrified pinball bouncing around, but it was different for him. Every time he planted his feet onto any wall, the boy knew he only had a few seconds before gravity would impact and cause him to fall to the ground. It meant constantly pushing off the wall like they were a springboard to stay in motion. The situation wasn't made any better as he saw the look of hesitation on his partner's face. I need Yaoyorozu's help, or I'll be exhausted long before the timer runs out. Besides his teacher's ability to turn his quirk off, Izuku had to worry about his capture scarf. Those damn things were being launched at him as he flew through the air for what seemed like an eternity, but in reality, it was only a few seconds. As he narrowly avoided his teacher's gaze, Izuku turned towards Momo. Yaoyorozu, we need to get away, he shouted, needing to grab her attention. Although his brief moment of not paying attention to his opponent costed him dearly, as he felt as if someone turned off his powers. Damn it, Izuku cursed at his decision, but knew he wasn't going to be able to beat their teacher without Yaoyorozu's help. It wasn't long until he fell towards the ground and landed on top of a closed dumpster, slamming into the cover. The green-haired boy felt a sharp pain in his back. That's definitely going to leave a mark in the morning, he muttered to himself. The boy wasn't given a chance to think about the pain as he felt something wrap around him. Izuku knew it was his teacher's capture scarf from the rather strange blend of cloth and metal pressing against his body. He attempted to activate his quirk, but was unable to do so because of Mr. Aizawa kept him within his peripheral vision. As I said earlier, I still have irrational students in my class. Izuku watched as the teacher walks towards Yaoyorozu, probably intent on ending their exam far earlier than either expected. What do I do? The ninth inheritor desperately searched for any solutions. The same could be said for Momo, as she just witnessed her partner get taken down by their teacher. In less than a minute, their teacher immobilized a student capable of leveling a building like it was child's play. She created a staff and tried to muster some courage, hoping to distract him long enough for Midoriya to break free. Ms. Yaoyorozu, why don't we end this little game? His question caused her to freeze in place. What game? What game? Mr. Aizawa maintained the same exhausted expression on his face, pretending you can simply be a hero without facing the problems plaguing you. His words made Momo's eyes widen. Don't try to argue with me, Ms. Yaoyorozu. The raven-haired girl wanted to deny his words, wanting to convince him that she was perfectly fine. And yet, she was trying to beat back the doubt in her mind. Mr. Aizawa kept talking. Think about the situation. Your partner has been captured by the enemy. What's the best possible solution? Run away, surrender, let them escape. Do you know what that means? It means the villain walks away free and has a chance to ruin other people's lives. To some, it might seem cruel to say such words to someone like Yaoyorozu. The pro-hero was willing to live with her hating him for saying those words as long as she understands the irrational thought of not facing these problems. Bottling them up and acting as if they don't exist isn't going to solve anything. In fact, it might make things worse in the long run. Momo glanced between her partner and Mr. Aizawa, needing a solution to help them get away. Smoke? It's better than nothing. Mr. Aizawa relies on vision, so I should take away his vision. Another idea came to mind, a really stupid one, but it might just work. Please, I just need a little luck. Momo felt the familiar pit in the bottom of her stomach. She looked down at Midoriya, who seemed to be equally struggling against his confines. She knew she needed to make it up to him for being so useless against their opponent when he needed her to help the most. Momo can only hope Midoriya was willing to forgive her for acting in such a manner. Across the alley, Mr. Aizawa watched as the girl suddenly threw her staff like it was some kind of javelin at him. Instinctively, the pro-hero used his capture scarf to slow the object down before it could hit him. Well, looks like she isn't totally useless in a fight. Mr. Aizawa was then blinded by white smoking engulfing the entire alley, preventing him from being able to see anything. He clicked his teeth in annoyance once he felt Midoriya escape from his sight, which was probably going to come back and bite him in the ass. He only had one thought. Fucking kids. They certainly know how to make someone work. 10. 2 minutes later. I think we got away. Izuku panted, feeling as if he just ran an entire marathon after putting some considerable distance between them and their homeroom teacher. A million different thoughts were running through his mind about the piss-poor effort being displayed by them. He knew it was going to take more than smoke to stop their teacher, but Izuku knew one thing about the situation. They need to work together. While he thought about the possible ways to beat a Batman clone, Izuku's thoughts were cut off by the sound of sobbing nearby. The only thing he could do was grimace. I need to say something. Now? Or I'll never be able to forgive myself for not saying anything to Yaoyorozu, especially after what Mr. Aizawa said to her. Meanwhile, Momo was feeling overwhelmed with shame and frustration over what just happened. She was utterly useless in the fight between Midoriya and Mr. Aizawa. Her partner was doing everything in his power to keep their opponent busy, hoping to keep their chances alive at passing the final exam. To see the effort being given by her partner made the raven-haired girl feel even worse. Momo could already feel the tears gathering her eyes, feeling the weight of everything finally crushing her resolve to get through the test. Why was she so stupid? Every decision she's made has blown up in her face. Why should I even keep going? There was a part of her beginning to question the reason for coming to Udata High. I can't even learn from my failures, so why try to be a hero? Those thoughts continued to gnaw away at what little remained of Momo's confidence. Honestly, the creation quirk user thought it was only a matter of time until she reaches the breaking point. Was today going to be the final straw and push her into the abyss known as failure? At this point, Momo was not doubting the possibility anymore. How are you feeling? Momo barely lifted her head. What? She saw Izuku look away, preferring to stare at the ground as he spoke once more. I was wondering how. Why you're feeling after what happened. The creation quirk user didn't respond, fearing the mask might finally break in front of her partner. She simply hid her face once more, wanting to hide and accept failure. While Momo tried to hold herself together, her partner was thinking about something else right now, and he decided to finally voice those thoughts eating away at him. I think understand what you're going through, Yaoyorozu. He suddenly spoke up, knowing it was now or never. He took a moment to wait and see her reaction before continuing to speak. It wasn't long until the girl gently lifted her head, revealing the tears streaking down her face and allowing him to see the shock in her eyes. The ninth inheritor took a deep breath before digging deep to say what he needed to say. I know what it's like to lose. To feel so desperately that you're right, yet fail nonetheless. For the past few years, I've known that be bitter feeling better than anyone. And that's why I want to help you and Momo. Izuku paused for a moment, scared about saying her first name so casually. He saw the surprised expression on her tear-stricken face. Truth to be told, you and I have never really talked until today. You, can argue we're total strangers. But I can't watch in silence as someone as amazing as you struggles so much. Amazing. Momo parroted the word quietly, feeling a bit embarrassed by someone using that word to describe her. I'm not amazing, Midoriya. He lightly shook his head, which earned a confused look from her. That's where you're wrong. Why you are amazing. Why do you think why you were chosen as a recommended student? His sudden question caught Momo off guard. She remained silent, unsure of what to say to him. The ninth inheritor smiled softly. You're easily the smartest person in the class, and maybe the whole grade. There's your awesome quirk, and I've always thought about how useful it is for a hero to have one like yours. Most of all, you're a really kind person, willing to help others like Aishido and Kaminari prepare for the F-finals. Despite everything you're feeling, nothing, and I truly mean nothing, can change those things about you. Momo noticed how the smile slowly faded from his face, seeing it become a thin line on his face. To me, what you said earlier about Mr. Aizawa needing to pay attention to me. That's where you're wrong. He should be paying attention to why you. I mean, see compared to you, I'm useless. But you can level a building, Midoriya. She tried to argue against him. Izuku remembered her attempt from earlier to put herself down. And, what do you think happens when Mr. Aizawa uses his quirk on me? Oh. His question made the raven-haired girl pause for a moment, seemingly unable to respond to the question. Yet, Momo knew the answer to the question. Izuku couldn't do anything without using his quirk. His super strength and speed could be taken away from him, but it still didn't mean he was useless. Momo. He still felt weird saying her name, but shoved those thoughts aside. I know losing can be more frustrating than anything in world, but don't let it consume you. Sometimes we have to fall. He fought back the painful memories trying to climb to the surface, so we can learn to pick ourselves up. When she heard those words from Midoriya, a part of her wanted to believe those words from the boy smiling at her, even if the raven-haired girl could hear the distress in his voice from saying those words. Why? Izuku still smiled at her. I can't stand by and watch someone suffer. He stretched his hand out to her. It's not in my nature. The raven-haired girl took a moment to ponder his words before ultimately reaching out and accepting his gesture. Chapter 5. Get to the finish line. Back with Shoto. Jesus, I didn't think these two would get their asses handed to them like that. Shoto stared at the screen, unable to hide his disappointment at the abysmal performance being put on display by his friend and the class vice president. It's like they weren't even trying to pass anymore, which only seemed to irritate the dual quirk user even more than before. After watching the piss-poor fight between his classmates and their homeroom teacher, Shoto could easily count the number of mistakes they had made since the test had started for them. Some ranged from not checking the rooftops above them, being unaware of their surroundings, and seemingly wandering the testing site like a bunch of idiots. Yet, the biggest offense was their inability to communicate with each other during the brief encounter with Mr. Izawa, who took advantage of the opportunity to beat them down and barely managing to escape after the class vice president had managed to think for 2 seconds. The dual quirk user was, at the very least, relieved to see his green-haired friend reacting accordingly and even going as far as using the experience they had gained in their fight against the hero killer as his guidelines. It certainly wasn't the worst idea in the world. Yet, there were very clear differences between the two individuals. For starters, Mr. Izawa doesn't have any sharp weapons on him. Shoto felt a phantom pain surge in his left arm, forcing him to remember what had happened. Although, I'm sure Izuku might need some serious motivation to get through this. On the other hand, Mr. Izawa can take away someone's quirk as long as he's looking at them. The fight, as he expected, went quite poorly for Izuku and Yaoyorozu, forcing them to have to get away or possibly fail the exam. During the encounter, he saw how his friend was constantly staying out of sight to lessen the chance of Mr. Izawa using his quirk on him. This meant that his friend was essentially having to carry the load and prevent their homeroom teacher from attacking Yaoyorozu, knowing she was not going to be much use in the fight. Honestly, Shoto had to wonder what the hell was going through her mind right now because the girl was smart enough to realize Izuku couldn't beat Mr. Izawa on his own. It wasn't until Izuku was basically captured by Mr. Izawa did his partner finally make up her mind. Using her staff as a distraction and deploying smoke grenades were just enough to confuse the professional hero, knowing he relied on his vision to have a chance against most criminals. Aside from that single moment, Shoto was really having a tough time believing that Yaoyorozu was going to recover from whatever was affecting her, or maybe Izuku might try to help their classmate. All he could wonder is if their class vice president was having trouble focusing on the test because she wasn't exactly living up to the whole recommended student pedestal they were placed on. After his classmates managed to flee from their homeroom teacher, Shoto thought about their chances of passing the finals. At best, their chances at passing seemed slim because unless something drastic happens, then they might as well turn themselves in and accept a failing grade. Maybe finding the exit and avoiding their homeroom teacher was probably their best shot, but something told him that Izuku wouldn't be satisfied with a result like that. Their fight during the sports festival had revealed the competitive spirit hidden deep inside his friend, and it was most likely the one thing preventing him from simply carrying Yaoyorozu to the exit and passing. Although, the dual quirk user was just hoping his classmates could simply talk to each other without acting like children about it. Knowing Izuku, he's already trying to reach out to the class vice president, Shoto concluded, recalling how insane he thought Izuku was for trying to help him during the middle of a battle. Despite being opponents, it didn't stop Izuku from reaching out to him. Shoto let out a sigh. He's insane. As Shoto looked back at the screen, he saw the smoke had been finally blown away to reveal an empty alleyway. Looks like Mr. Izawa is back on the hunt for them. The screen had gone black for a moment before switching to what appeared to be another testing site, but his eyes were focused on his classmates standing inside of it. He saw the familiar face of Uraraka, who appeared to have her eyes closed, and her partner looking into a handheld mirror. Right, Uraraka and Aoyama are the next pair for the exams. Shoto was curious to see how his classmate was going to perform in her matchup against 13, who was her favorite hero from what Izuku had told him, which made him interested to see how she was going to do against her idol. He could only pray she had better luck than Izuku in her match. Still, the dual quirk user wanted to see the gravity quirk user in action. He remembered hearing something about her spending time at Gunhead's hero agency during their internship, an interesting choice for someone who wants to specialize in being a rescue hero. The dual quirk user knew her match wasn't going to draw the same interest as some of the others, but Shoto wanted to see why his green-haired friend held such respect for Uraraka. I wish you the best of luck, Uraraka. 13 isn't a pushover despite being a rescue hero. Shoto heard a buzzer going off, letting Uraraka and Aoyama know the test had begun. Hopefully, the gravity quirk user wasn't feeling as nervous as before. Despite your opponent, you certainly aren't a pushover from what I've seen. 10. Back with Izuku. Throughout his first few months as a student at Udata High, Izuku had been exposed to all sorts of dangerous situations that most people would never imagine happening to someone around his age. It all started with the attack on the USJ training facility by numerous criminals and a very dangerous creature capable of going one-on-one with All Might. Most thought the incident was nothing more than a one-time event, exposing first-year students like Izuku to the dangers in their line of work. Except, the ninth inheritor had been caught up in another incident alongside Shoto and Ida. Izuku wouldn't blame anyone for thinking he possessed bad luck, as the young boy feared this trend would continue to happen. Now, he was having to throw himself into another dangerous situation involving an opponent that could easily defeat him without too much trouble. Mr. Aizawa almost seems to enjoy the brief fight between them, making him wonder if the teacher harbored something against him. Why does everyone seem to hate me? He questioned, thinking about individuals like Kaken, Mr. Aizawa, and even villains. It led to Izuku wondering if their plan to beat their homeroom teacher was going to succeed. Time was not in their favor as they had less than 6 minutes to either capture Mr. Aizawa or locate the exit and escape. Plus, he wasn't exactly betting on luck to save the day because his track record was, pretty bad. The only thing he could do was follow the plan created by Momo and simply place his trust in her. As Izuku continued to traverse across rooftops, using his excellent mobility and speed to make his way across town, he made sure to keep an eye for Mr. Aizawa. The plan relied on Izuku being able to get their teacher's attention and get him on the move. So, what happens if the plan, doesn't work, Yairozu? Izuku asked, speaking into the communication earpiece, a useful tool to help them stay in contact with the other as they were forced to split up to make this work. There was a brief moment of silence before his partner responded, "Well, I'm not too keen on finding out. I doubt we'll be able to get another chance." "Oh, I'll do my best then." He tried to sound confident, hearing the uncertainty in his partner's voice. "By the way," she said, catching his attention as he leaped across another gap between buildings. "It's fine if you want to call me by my first name," she told him, which had surprised Izuku and nearly causing him to fall off the edge of the rooftop if it wasn't for his quick reflexes. Izuku was taken entirely by surprise after hearing those words come from the class vice president, unsure if he was going crazy or if she really did say those words to him. The ninth inheritor tried to fight back the growing blush on his face. Wasn't exactly every day when a very pretty girl like Yairozu was allowing him to call her by her first name. He didn't know how to respond to such a thing. A few moments later, Izuku manages to calm down enough to speak up. "Why you don't need to force yourself or anything, Yairozu. I'm, perfectly alright with calling you by your last name." A part of him was just hoping she would accept his reasoning. "I'm not forcing myself or anything," she said, continuing to press the issue. "There's nothing wrong with calling me by my first name." R. Izuku glanced around his surroundings, hoping their teacher wasn't around to hear the little disagreement between them. "Are you sure?" he asked his partner, feeling as if his heart had skipped a beat right now. "Yes. In fact, I would prefer if you called me by my first name." The kind tone behind her words almost seemed to make his heart skip a beat for some reason, causing his face to go from red to crimson. Okay then. Besides, you already did call me by my first name." Izuku wanted to die from embarrassment after hearing her say that to him, forced to remember what he had said during his attempt to encourage her. "So there's no reason for you to stop now." Izuku was struggling to believe this entire conversation was really happening and not some kind of fever dream. He could never imagine himself mustering the courage to talk to someone as amazing as Momo. He tried to calm down, knowing it wouldn't do him any good to act so flusteredly in their situation. "Also, I was wondering something. And, if it's all right with you, may I refer to you by your first name?" Huh. It was the only thing he could say without possibly making a fool of himself. Izuku, even in his wildest dreams, never imagined believed a day would come when a girl would ask if it was okay for her to use his first name. Honestly, he could never recall a time when he's felt so nervous in life. Fighting against Kaken, Stain, and those criminals didn't seem to evoke the same reaction from him. So what was so different about this time? Why yeah, I'm okay with you using my name. And Momo, he stuttered, unable to stay calm while talking to her. He heard Momo, still getting used to saying her name out loud, clearing her throat. That is, good to hear. Izuku, she told him. I will let you know when I'm in position. Izuku tried his best to sound normal, a very complicated thing for him to accomplish, but he was able to prevent himself from stuttering or tripping over his words. After those final words, Izuku tried to calm down from the brief conversation between them. He knew talking to girls was not his strong suit, especially pretty ones like Momo. Even talking to Momo was a much different experience than talking to Uraraka. The ninth inheritor felt more anxious and, possibly, more excited to interact with the class vice president. Great. All I can do is think about Momo in the middle of the finals. Izuku knew he was prone to letting his mind wander into dangerous places. Yet, he seems to have no problems with thinking about the beautiful raven-haired girl. Wait, where the hell did that come from? His eyes slightly widened in surprise, realizing the words he used to describe her. Izuku let out a groan. I swear, I need to talk to All Might. One for All really might bring its user bad luck, or maybe I'm overthinking things. 10. Back with Momo. Why did I ask him that? There's no reason to ask such a thing. Momo was trying to understand her sudden desire to ask her partner if it was all right to call him by his first name. Originally, she was only planning on answering his question regarding their chances of succeeding and finding out if he's made any progress. That's all she was going to talk to him about until her brain decided to let her emotions take over for a change. She knew her classmate never liked calling anyone by their first name, excluding Todoroki. Yet, she continued to press the matter and wouldn't take no for an answer from him. Izuku. Even thinking about his name was enough to remind her about the words of encouragement from him. For most of her life, Momo had never really met anyone willing to show such kindness and concern for her. The only person who came close to showing such similar emotions was her father. Those kind words were almost enough to where she nearly broke down and cried on the spot. It made her recall those conversations with Ochako and the other girls, especially whenever Izuku became a topic among them. A part of her was starting to believe in the idea of the green-haired boy not possessing a single bad bone in his body, as well as his willingness to help others. She was definitely starting to regret never really talking to her fellow classmate. It's led to her wanting to return the kindness he showed her today. Hopefully, I can make it up to him by helping us pass our final exam. Momo had suspected her partner must have been somewhat frustrated with her recent actions. In her mind, she thought most people would have yelled at her or cursed her out for being so useless during their fight against an opponent. To her surprise, Izuku showed no visible signs of frustration or irritation about her performance. Emotions like nervousness or timidness, but never anger. Izuku was willing to act as bait for the plan to work, unaware of the ever-increasing guilt she felt for forcing such a role on him. Most people would have balked at the idea, while Izuku seems to have no such reservations and agreed with her plan, saying she was the only person who could make it work. His faith caused her to question him at that very moment. Why are you willing to trust me? I could screw up or do something that'll cause us to fail. She remembered blushing at his answer. I can trust you because you can make the right decisions, despite what you may believe about yourself. Did you forget how you helped keep some of our classmates alive during the USJ attack? And most people couldn't hope to achieve the same thing. So, I'm willing to trust you. Even thinking about his words caused Momo's heart rate to skyrocket. Those words certainly gave the raven-haired girl a much-needed confidence boost after everything she's been forced to deal with for the past 2 months. It was only made better knowing someone could relate to her, possibly giving her a chance to work out these negative feelings. Speaking of negative feelings, Momo was referring the brief moment of pain in her partner's voice during his little pep talk. Those final words almost seemed to be something special to him or held some significance to him. Looks like she wasn't the only one keeping their problems to themselves. Then a thought occurred to her. What if I? Momo blushed at the idea and shoved it to the back of her head. There's no way I could even think about trying to help him. He might think I'm just being nosy. We're not friends, or not yet, I hope. And I doubt being friends would change much. As she thought about the prospect of friendship with the timid boy known as Izuku Midoriya, there was still a part of her nervous about the plan. To beat a man like Mr. Aizawa meant thinking outside the box because, unlike most heroes, their homeroom teacher had learned to survive on his own. It meant he was willing to use every trick in the book to beat the person in front of him. You better to make it through this, she muttered. Momo vowed to repay Izuku for everything he's done for her. The first thing on the list was passing the final exam, and that required beating a very grumpy homeroom teacher called Mr. Aizawa. 10. Back with Izuku, 2 minutes later. And maybe using those flashbangs on Mr. Aizawa wasn't such a good idea. Over the past few months, Izuku believed his combat skills had improved from his recent experience fighting against actual criminals and villains. They helped solidify some of the techniques he uses in combat and showing the ninth inheritor what does and doesn't work. Despite making such enormous progress in this category, why did it feel like Mr. Aizawa was simply toying with him? His second attempt to fight Mr. Aizawa didn't exactly leave him with a warm feeling his soul after managing to escape. The ninth inheritor knew using those flashbangs would upset their teacher, especially since the USJ incident affected him more than he let on. It's why Izuku was able to throw a few supercharged punches and avoid the man's capture scarf. As he jumped across a gap between rooftops, Izuku reached for the communication piece in his ear. He needed to warn Momo about their incoming teacher. I managed to succeed in getting him to follow me. Izuku didn't need to wait long as he heard his partner's voice on the other side of it. Good. Just keep playing keep away, and you should be fine. I'm almost ready over here. For a moment, Izuku didn't say anything as a single thought entered his mind. Is she nervous? He wondered. He knew rebuilding self-confidence would take a lot more than just some pep talk or a single victory at something. No, Izuku understood how difficult the path was going to be for his partner. His journey to become a great hero started with a single phrase from the one person he admired more than anyone in the entire world. Young man, you can become a hero. All Might had given him hope in a world filled with darkness. He was born without a quirk in a world where possessing powers was the norm. It meant his existence would always be called into question by those around him. Even after being personally trained by All Might, the ninth inheritor thought about the enormous responsibility placed onto his shoulders to take over as the symbol of peace. Izuku turned his head to see if their homeroom teacher was still following him. Looks like using both flashbangs Momo gave me was overkill. The young boy feared what was going to happen to him when the exams were over and they were back in the classroom. It was not going to be a pleasant experience for him, or Momo since she made them for him. He spoke into the earpiece. You'll be fine. Just remember what IT told you, and Momo. Izuku was still getting used to calling his partner by her first name. A part of him wanted to pass the exam to continue gathering as much experience as possible. Time was not on his side, as All Might's career was coming to an end soon. On the other hand, there was a smaller part of him that wanted to pass because it would help Momo start rebuilding her self-confidence. I remember, Izuku. Hopefully, I can live up to the faith you've placed onto my shoulders, she told him. You will. I know it. Momo didn't seem to respond to his last words, making Izuku wonder if he was being too comfortable with his raven-haired partner. Sure, he wasn't exactly the prime example of confidence in the world. Izuku was well aware of his timid nature and how it contrasted with his behavior in real-life battles. To him, it was easier to get lost in his head and not think about his problems whenever he threw himself into his training to become a hero. Maybe today isn't just a brand new start for her. Izuku just wanted his partner to believe in herself. Everyone, including himself, knew she was going to become an amazing hero after graduating. As he landed on a rooftop, Izuku suddenly heard her voice in his ear once again. Thank you. I never got a chance to say those words after you said your words of encouragement. Now, let's spring our little trap on Mr. Aizawa. Izuku was more thankful than ever for Mr. Aizawa, chasing him down. The ninth inheritor feared his brain was going to shut down after hearing those words from his raven-haired partner. If someone had told him he was going to be thanked by Momo Yaoyorozu, the class vice president and recommended student, Izuku might have laughed or say that would never happen. Well, it has happened. Izuku couldn't finish his thoughts on the matter as he felt the familiar rush of power leave his body. He turned to face his teacher, who landed on the same rooftop as him. Hello, Mr. Aizawa. Throughout his time at Udata High, Izuku had never seen what their teacher looked like whenever he was truly upset. Now, the young boy could claim to have witnessed the face of a very, very irritated pro-hero like Mr. Aizawa. Stop going for the eyes, problem child. Oh boy, Mr. Aizawa was beyond pissed after being hit with a pair of flashbangs. Chapter 6, moving on. At least, you didn't break any bones during the entire exam. It's certainly an improvement after the first few months of school, and I'm sure Recovery Girl will appreciate the effort as well. Izuku stared at Shoto with a blank expression on his face. That's it? After everything I just told you right now, that's what you take away from the entire situation, man. The dual quirk user shrugged his shoulders at his friend's response. Look, I'm not exactly going to comment on whatever is happening between you and Yaoyorozu. All I will say, however, is good luck with that. Huh? Come on. Shoto shook his head at his friend's surprise at hearing that. You can't be serious. I wasn't the only person in our class to see our vice president hugging you after you guys captured Mr. Aizawa. I already heard some people talking about if something is happening between you two. Unable to decide between blushing in silence or denying such rumors, Izuku had gone with some form of both. He carefully waved his hands while his face resembled something like a tomato. Me and Momo? No, there's nothing going on between us. In his poor attempt to explain himself, Izuku had made an enormous mistake by referring to his partner by her first name. A mistake that evoked a reaction from Shoto, which was nothing more than raising an eyebrow, and made him question his friend. First name, huh? What? Shoto smiled in amusement, which was nothing more than his mouth twitching upwards for a moment, and explained himself. If you're going to deny anything happened between you and the vice president, I don't think using her first name is going to help with the situation. Oh, I was just. Izuku failed to come up with a reason until his friend waved him off. You don't need to say anything to me. Currently, Izuku and Shoto were standing near the back of the main lobby and talking about what had happened during the former's exam. It started with the PA system announcing their success over their opponent, Mr. Aizawa, and caught the attention of their classmates. Except, the only thing that seems to be important was the hug between them. Why did she hug you? Izuku leaned against the wall, letting his shoulders slouch in defeat. The ninth inheritor knew his friend was going to ask him, eventually. He scratched his cheek. I don't know. We, managed to work together to beat Mr. Aizawa. We heard the announcement, and, all of a sudden, she was giving me a hug. I don't believe you. Shoto had trouble believing the story between his friend and their class vice president was that simple. His reason for being doubtful stemmed from what had happened during these last few weeks. Incidents like Stain and the sports festival proved how Izuku was more than willing to help others without even caring about his own safety or feelings. While the camera hadn't followed his classmates after their first encounter with Mr. Aizawa, it didn't take a genius to realize that something had happened prior to their second, more successful, encounter with their homeroom teacher. Granted, their fight wasn't perfect, but Shoto saw the vast improvement when it came to teamwork. You don't believe me? Izuku asked him, curious about his friend's reasoning. Izuku, you are probably the most selfless person I've ever met in life. Shoto decided to get his point across in the most direct way possible. He continued speaking, knowing it was weird for him to talk as much as he was right now. So, don't blame me for thinking you stuck your neck out and tried helping Yaoyorozu. It's the only thing that comes to mind, especially since you're involved. In the time since they've become friends, Shoto had come to learn how much Izuku was willing to give up to help others. Hell, this crazy green-haired bastard cared more about helping him, a boy consumed by hatred, than winning the famous sports festival. He noticed how his friend's eyes widened after hearing those words. Shoto was thinking he might have crossed the line with his inner thoughts. Sorry. I'm not trying to pressure you into telling me what happened. Didn't mean to sound like Hagakure and Ishido. Did you just try to make a joke? Izuku chuckled at Shoto's attempt at humor. Whatever. As they settled into a comfortable silence, Izuku started to think about the exam and everything that had happened. While thinking about the events that led to their victory, he noticed his classmates talking with each other. Although, he was paying more attention to his raven-haired partner more than everyone else. Izuku saw she was talking to Ishido and Kaminari, who looked very upset for some reason, making him wonder if they failed their exam. Besides his match, there were a few other matches that were currently going on. I hope Uraraka and Ida passed their exam. Izuku wanted his friends to succeed as he knew they had the skills to beat their opponents. It must be tough for Uraraka to fight someone like 13. If I had to fight All Might, I think things might have been very different for me. To face an opponent like All Might would require cooperation and sheer luck. This is a man considered one of the greatest heroes in Japan's history and the strongest individual that's ever appeared since quirks had first appeared in their world. He glanced over at his stoic friend. Maybe I should ask Shoto about how it felt to fight All Might. It might be really good information to have in my notebook. I wonder what Momo might think. Wait, why did I just think about? God, what is wrong with me? It made him wonder about his standing with the girls in his class. The ninth inheritor knew he wasn't the most appealing guy in the class, especially since his desire to become a hero dominated his life. A mindset he shared with his mentor, who has never expressed any regret towards never starting a family or meeting someone. Granted, he was well aware of the reason behind his mentor's aversion to such ties. All for one, Izuku remembered the story about the so-called symbol of evil, an eternal figure that has been around since quirks had first started popping up. Izuku knew he would be going down a rabbit hole if he kept thinking about his future. Would people accept him as the new symbol of peace? Or would they reject him and say he was nothing more than a copycat? I wonder what Dad would have thought about all of this. 10. Back with Momo. While Izuku was dealing with the numerous questions plaguing his life, the ninth inheritor was not the only person being questioned about the unexpected intimacy between them. In another part of the main lobby, Momo was being constantly questioned by her friends. The creation quirk user knew they were going to be questioned after hugging Izuku for everyone in their class to see. Yet, she was not prepared for the barrage of questions from people like Mina and Toru. They kept asking if there was something brewing between her and Izuku, because neither of them had ever spoken until today. Momo had tried explaining the situation, telling them that nothing was happening between them. Oh, come on, Mina groaned, throwing her head back after hearing the truth. She wasn't the only disappointed person, as Toru, the invisible girl in their class, shared her thoughts. Seriously? I was thinking you and Midoriya would have made a cute couple, Toru said, catching the attention of those around her. What? Momo didn't bother to hide her shock. Toru giggled at her friend's reaction. He may be a bit timid and soft-spoken with people, but can any of you say he's not worth giving a shot? I wouldn't mind going out with him. Other than Mina, Toru, and Momo, the only other girl in the main lobby with them was Kyoka. Mina agreed with her invisible friend. Toru has a point about Midori. He's got the whole adorable face, especially those freckles. Plus, there's no denying the boy is a hunk with all those muscles underneath his clothes. All the girls knew Mina and Toru were never shy about sharing their thoughts about the boys in their class. These kinds of conversations always ended with Momo blushing, as she could never muster the courage to express such devious comments. It was only made worse as the raven-haired girl couldn't necessarily deny some level of truth behind those words. I will refrain from commenting on that. It was the only response Momo could give without blushing out of embarrassment. Besides Momo, the only other person who hadn't said anything was Kyoka. The rocker girl had been relatively silent during the conversation, and it seems to finally catch the attention of everyone around her. Unfortunately, someone had taken notice of her silence and decided to see what the musician of their class thought about. What do you think, Kyoka? The question from the invisible girl had gained the attention of the other girls. Yeah, I want to know what you think about him, Mina said. Kyoka was hoping to avoid these types of conversations, considering she was going to be called up for her exam in the next few minutes. The rocker girl was tempted to lie. But out of the corner of her eye, she saw Momo looking at her with curiosity in her eyes. It made Kyoko wonder if her best friend was lying about nothing happening between her and Midoriya. He's a pretty cool guy. Kyoko shrugged her shoulders in a nonchalant manner and gave them an answer. I mean, he stole the show at the sports festival during the one-on-one fights. The guy was crazy enough to break his bones just to fight Todoroki. And then there are the crazy improvements he's made after the hero internships. When she finished speaking about their green-haired classmate, they heard the PA system come to life. Everyone heard the familiar voice of Present Mike. Ochako Uraraka and Yuga Aoyama have passed. The next group is Kyokujiro and Koji Koda. Can they please report to their testing site? Great. Time to fight our English teacher. Kyoko was not looking forward to fighting the hero. She looked at her friends. I'm really not looking to this. Mina couldn't help but mutter. At least, you'll have a better chance than me. You'll be fine, Toru said. The creation quirk user turned towards her best friend and nodded. I'm inclined to agree with Toru. I know you'll pass the exam if these last few weekends have proved anything of your determination. Thanks, guys. Kyoko smiled in appreciation. As they watched their friend walk away, Momo felt a bit terrible for lying to her friends. She hadn't stopped thinking about their brief conversation after coming up with a plan to defeat Mr. Aizawa. The creation quirk user couldn't deny how much Izuku's words impacted her, especially since they were able to defeat their homeroom teacher. Well, we haven't said a word to each other after the test concluded. Momo was hoping to talk more with her partner after walking back into the main lobby. Much to her dismay, Izuku had said something about needing to do something, but she was thinking the hug may have been too much for him. Still, it did little to make her stop thinking about their brief moment in that alleyway. 10. During the exam. So what do you think? Momo was trying her hardest to handle the enormous pressure being placed onto her shoulders. In fact, she was actively questioning if it is possible to create any viable strategy capable of defeating an opponent like Mr. Aizawa, considering the man's background as a pro hero. Factors such as his quirk, experience, and even combat ability are all things Momo needed to take into account, because if she miscalculates anything. The recommended student shuddered at the outcome. I don't even want to imagine it. A T-trap, she heard her partner say, hearing the concern in his voice. The creation quirk user knew the risks that came with performing such a strategy, especially since it relied on Midoriya to succeed in gaining their teacher's attention. She reluctantly nodded, giving her partner an answer. It's the only thing I could come up within such a tight window. Momo saw him shake his head. Yaoyorozu, why you did your best, Midoriya told her. She noticed how he seemed to get quiet after saying those words, making her wonder what was wrong with him. Soon, the alleyway had become eerily silent as neither student knew what to say to the other. Momo suddenly had a thought and, fearful at the idea of failing once more, started to think about what may have been going through his head. Did I do something wrong? She questioned. That simple thought began to snowball, and she had spoken up, catching his attention. Why? Is it a bad plan? Did I forget to take something into consideration? Or do you think it won't work? Her partner's eyes widened in shock at hearing all those questions. And no, not at all, Yaoyorozu. Your plan is really good. Momo watched as her green-haired classmate looked away, causing her to wonder if something was bugging him. Midoriya, what's wrong then? She asked him, wanting a straight answer. I know you don't want to hurt me, but if you think there's something wrong with it, please let me know. The class vice president waited with bated breath. It's not your plan. No, I'm worried, that I might screw it up. His words almost seemed to fail to register with her brain. What? Midoriya looked up at her, an awkward smile on his face, and tried to explain himself. I've always struggled to have faith in myself, and so when I hear how quickly you came with that plan, I can't fight back the possibility that I might mess it up, Yaoyorozu. The alleyway had become silent once more, causing the green-haired boy to look towards his partner, hoping to get a response from her. Except, he was greeted with the sight of her seemingly twirling her front bang without much thought. It made him nervous as to what she was thinking about right now. Although, Midoriya would be surprised to learn that his partner was shocked to hear such doubts from him. He thinks he might screw this plan up? Momo had no real response to his explanation, surprised to learn he harbored such thoughts. In all honesty, Momo never really imagined someone like Midoriya having trouble with believing in himself. Throughout the first few months of the school year, Momo had noticed how quickly Midoriya seemed to jump the gap between him and their other, more powerful, classmates like Bakugo and Todoroki. Not everyone could make such a major leap without hard work or belief in oneself. Without really thinking about it, Momo had voiced her opinion. Mess it up, she repeated that part to him before shaking her head. No, you'll be fine. I know you can do it, Midoriya. A smile appeared on her face, which she hoped would show Midoriya the faith she had in him. At that moment, he didn't say anything back, but his slow nod and widened eyes were enough for the raven-haired girl to know her partner had gotten the message. The only thing that remained was actually going out and getting the job done. I should, get going then, he said, earning a simple nod from her. She watched as he stood up and walked a few feet away from her. It didn't take long for the familiar bolts of green lightning to surround Midoriya's body, a scene that had always been a source of curiosity for Momo. There was just something interesting about them, and that curiosity had only reached another level after getting to see them up close and personal. Why, Yaoyorozu? Yes. Momo noticed the small blush on her partner's face as he seemed to be trying to say something. I just wanted to say. He took a pause before turning to face her. The green-haired boy had a small smile on his face. Why, your plan will work. I know it will, Yaoyorozu. And we will pass our final exam. 10. Present time, back with Momo. When she heard those words from her partner, Momo couldn't deny there was something inspiring about Izuku. During the sports festival, the raven-haired girl remembered hearing about how Izuku was willing to break limbs to help Todoroki for some reason. His heroic nature was admired by everyone in their class, including her. It only fueled Momo's decision to get to know Izuku and, maybe, become friends with him. She knew about her classmates' struggle in social settings as these first few months of school only seemed to reinforce the possibility of him facing bullying in his younger years. In fact, Ochako had always mentioned the early struggles when it came to being friends with their green-haired classmate. Momo definitely held some reservations about wanting to become friends with him. It mostly stemmed from not wanting to seem nosy or weird to Izuku. And you said there was nothing going between you and Izuku. Huh. She jumped back in surprise after hearing Toru speak up. Don't lie to us. Mina decided to back up her invisible friend. The pink-skinned girl smirked. You were thinking about Midori, weren't you? And no. Mina and Toru looked at their class vice president with smirks on their faces, appearing more like sharks after smelling blood in the water. Sure, whatever you say. The creation quirk user attempted to defend herself. I wasn't thinking about him. Will you guys drop it? If that's what you want, Yamamoto, then okay. Both girls seemed to drop the subject quicker than Momo would have liked. She knew how much these two loved to gossip about rumors, especially those surrounding romance in their school, and it made her very concerned about what they were thinking. Before she had a chance to further ponder on the situation, Momo heard a few of her classmates cheering in the background. She turned around and saw her fellow class representative, Ida, and Ochako coming back from their exams. There was an announcement for Ochako passing. However, Momo didn't hear anything for the speedster and his partner passing their respective exam. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Izuku walking towards Ochako. There was nothing wrong with that, as they were good friends. Now, the strangest sight was seeing Todoroki walking just behind him. The son of Endeavor never seemed like the kind of person to bother with such formalities, or that was what Momo thought about the only other recommended student in their class. Soon, the group around Ochako had begun shrinking as another pair of students were called to take their exam. This is when she thought of an idea. Maybe I can use this as an opportunity to talk with Izuku. Momo could congratulate her friend for passing the exam as well as getting an opportunity to talk with her partner and, hopefully, get to know him better. God, I sound like some love-struck teenager from one of my novels. With those final thoughts, the creation quirk user had made up her mind. Today, she was going to befriend the boy known as Izuku Midoriya. Chapter 7. Is friendship blooming? An accident? I like to think of it as a miracle if you ask me. Shoto had always been considered a blunt person by his family, especially his older sister. He likes to blame his old man for why he possessed such a mindset, and his classmates were getting to see what it was like to be on the receiving end of such comments from him. Currently, Uraraka had just finished explaining the reasoning behind her and Aoyama coming out as victorious over 13, a famous rescue hero. It wasn't their victory that caused Shoto to say such a comment, but the manner in which they defeated a professionally trained hero. For two first-year students to defeat a hero because of a mistake was definitely concerning. If any of their teachers were supposed to be teaching them something, Shoto had to wonder if there was much for Uraraka to take from the exam. Sure, anyone would be happy to defeat a pro hero in combat, but he doubted Uraraka was going to be satisfied with those results. The brunette had gone out of her way to train with a hero like Gunhead, even if she was apparently aiming to become a rescue hero. He wasn't alone as the class president chimed into the conversation. I'm afraid I have to agree with Todoroki about your recklessness, Uraraka. What? I still managed to turn it around. Shoto wanted to roll his eyes at her poor attempt to defend her actions, despite knowing there was some level of truth to their words. He watched as she turned towards their mutual green-haired friend. You agree with me, right, Deku? His answer had taken everyone by complete surprise, including Shoto. I kind have to agree with them, Uraraka. You know, I like to believe it says something when our resident. Shoto couldn't stop snorting in amusement at the irony behind those words. Crazy green-haired bastard thinks you're being recklessness. Language. Shoto raised an eyebrow at Ida's outburst. Really? Their class president started lecturing the dual quirk user. Heroes in training shouldn't be using such crude language when addressing their fellow classmates. Todoroki. You want to tell that to my father? Shoto tried to hide his amusement after seeing the speedster cringe at hearing him reference his father. Endeavor is a well-respected and powerful hero. He doesn't need to hear such words from a novice such as myself, Todoroki. Whatever you say, Ida. The others could still hear the absolute distaste their classmate has for his father. It's why their class president had been caught off guard by his retort, leaving Ida struggling to find something to say that doesn't involve their classmate's father. Sensing their unease, Shoto decided to dispel whatever it was going through their mind. My bad, Ida. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable with that comment. Shoto watched as the class president seemed to relax after hearing those words. Ida tried his best to wave off his apology. No, there's no need for you to be saying such a thing. It was insensitive of me. While everyone knew about their stoic classmate wasn't the biggest fan of his father from the last few months, Izuku was the only person aware of the truth behind such scorn. Other than explosive hothead eavesdropping on the private conversation between them during the sports festival. Just drop it, Ida. Shoto put a bit more force behind his words, remembering about Ida coming from a family that prided themselves on formality and responsibility. Thankfully, it got the reaction he wanted as Ida seemed to get the message. He reluctantly nodded, of course. Meanwhile, Ochako had been watching the interactions between Ida and Todoroki with some interest as she's begun to realize how much the latter had changed over these past few months. At the beginning of the year, he was a quiet and reserved individual who didn't seem to go out of his way to make any friends with anyone in their class. Now, Todoroki was talking with his classmates more often and seemed to relax a lot more than before. Her train of thought brought her back to the brief conversation between them. He did talk about some promise he made with Deku. Something about interacting with our classmates more often. I guess this is his way of making good on it. She remembered being surprised by his willingness to ask about her anxiety about facing 13. It was a kind gesture, especially from someone like Todoroki. Other than Deku and Ida, the gravity quirk user really didn't have any other close friends to talk about her troubles and was curious at the chance to get to know Todoroki. Unlike Deku, he didn't speak to people because he had trouble or anxiety about it. Todoroki must not like making small talk or wasting his time, which was a big reason why some of the girls were always hesitant about approaching him. As for the differences between Todoroki and Ida, she could easily say their homes taught them very different things. While Ida was all about formality, their stoic classmate was more about getting things done. It could probably be attributed to having someone like Endeavor as their father. All these thoughts made Ochako realize there was an opportunity to become friends with Todoroki. The only question was if he was willing to become friends. Sure, Todoroki was perfectly fine being friends with Deku, but their friendship was born from the flames of a battle against each other and, ultimately, the hero killer. Plus, Ochako wasn't exactly lying about his smile being half bad. It was nice to see something other than frown, thin line, or scowl on their classmate's face. As she was thinking about the son of Endeavor, the other three were currently talking about some of the matchups between the remaining students and teachers. Jiro and Koda are supposed to be fighting against Present Mike? I give them a 50-50 chance of passing that fight. Shoto voiced his opinion after being asked what he thought about it. Izuku had to agree with his friend. Yeah, I have to agree with Shoto. It could go either way between them. Both rely on sound and are going against a pro hero who has trained with his ability for years. Ito was going to add something to the conversation when another person entered the ring. I like to think my best friend and our classmate have a better chance than 50-50. I knew Todoroki liked to think that way, but I expected something more positive from you, Izuku. The three boys turned to see the class vice president approaching them. Out of everyone, Izuku was beyond terrified at the prospect of interacting with Momo after the exam. At least, he didn't have to worry about what others were going to think about them speaking to each other. Now, his closest friends were going to be around him. Was that normal? Did unusually attractive girls still want to talk to guys like him? A lot of questions were bumbling around in his head, making him nervous about what may happen. He was fearful of the idea of saying something utterly stupid in front of her or making a complete fool of himself. I, just thought that, they're facing a pro hero. And, anyone might be doubtful of them. Izuku was trying his best to remain calm, but he was failing quite hard. Momo saw his reaction, realizing he must have thought she was being serious. Izuku, don't worry about it. I'm sure Kyuko would agree with you. The raven-haired girl attempted to clear things up as she didn't him to feel guilty or uncomfortable. She watched as he seems to take her words and, slowly, began to calm down. As for her, Momo had hoped to come over and speak with Izuku. Looks like it backfired on her, as she felt pretty terrible for putting him on the spot like that. Never once did he look her in the face, preferring to look at the floor or the ceiling with far more interest. As the two students were unsure of what to do, they were miraculously saved by the last person either of them could have imagined. Hey, Uraraka, do you remember that thing I needed to talk to you about? Shoto's question caught everyone off guard, including the gravity quirk user. What? The brunette narrowed her brow in confusion. I don't remember you needing to talk to me about anything. Shoto walked over and grabbed her by the hand. Yeah, you don't remember our conversation from before your exam. He wasn't the only one who sensed the atmosphere between their green-haired friend and the class vice president. Ida's eyes briefly widened in realization before clearing his throat and speaking up. I just remembered about Mashireo. He wanted to discuss our performance in the exam. I must apologize for needing to leave you, my friends. In an instant, Momo and Izuku were suddenly left alone as the others left them. What just happened? Izuku was stunned at his friends deciding to leave him alone. He thought it was strange for Ida to forget about something like talking with their classmate about their performance in the exam, but Shoto and Uraraka talking to each other. Momo, equally as surprised as him, though she might have an answer. Maybe all of them sensed the awkward atmosphere between us and wanted to get away from it. Her answer got a chuckle from Izuku as he rubbed the back of his head. And maybe you're right. Or, maybe Shoto wanted to be alone with Uraraka. Much like her answer, Momo giggled at the idea of their stoic classmate and the bubbly gravity girl wanting some alone time. Or maybe there was a hint to that truth. 10. A few moments later. So, why are you talking to me? Izuku, despite his growth as a person, was still always cautious about why people wanted to talk to him or be friends with him. His childhood had basically laid the groundwork for his crippling issues when it came to interacting with people or trusting them. Even after becoming friends with Ida and Uraraka, he hardly talked about his past in any significant way. Whenever the topic came up, Izuku had deflected the conversation towards something less problematic to reveal or something that made it easier for him to lie, such as his quirkless nature or the truth behind the relationship between him and Kaken. Now he was talking with someone as amazing as Momo. His former partner had tilted her head in confusion. Do I need a reason? Izuku waved his hands in a defensive manner. And no, you don't need one to speak to me. I was just curious as to what led you talking to, well, me. Oh, the awkwardness from prior to their exam had returned in full force, making the raven-haired girl wonder if it was a mistake to talk Izuku, and forced one of them to speak up. Or, more specifically, Izuku wanting to know why someone as amazing as Momo was wasting her time with him. Guys like Ida or Shoto might have been a better person to talk with than him. Momo then spoke up. Izuku, can I ask you something? He nodded, unsure of what she was going to ask him. Why did you stick with me during the exam? Momo had been thinking about a lot of things after their exam was over. From how someone like him would rate their performance, or there anything they could have done differently. All these questions were valid, but none of them were like the one she had just asked him. Both students were away from most of their class, as the main lobby was quite large and filled with numerous monitors in the room. Other than the occasional glances from their classmates, Momo and Izuku had been able to speak to each other without worrying about what others might say. Even Mina and Toru were taking their exams, making things much easier for them. It allowed Izuku to gather his thoughts, thinking about his answer to her question. He could have done something like talking about his past, but the ninth inheritor decided to give a simple answer. I just couldn't sit and watch you suffer, Momo. The bluntness behind his answer had caught the raven-haired girl off guard. Suffer. Izuku recalled the miserable expression on Momo's face, hearing her self-doubt, and realizing she was fighting the same demon like him. He took a deep breath before revealing his private thoughts to her. As I said during the exam, I know what it's like to lose, doubt your self-worth, and question if you should follow your path. You sound like you're talking from experience, Momo pointed out, a little concerned about how easily her partner manages to rattle off her problems. I do. When he finished speaking, neither of them knew what to say after Izuku confirmed it. Momo never imagined someone like Izuku had suffered from similar problems like her, especially when thinking about everything he's done in his short time in Udata High. It made her wonder how someone could close such a massive gap between him and his peers in such a short amount of time. Even Todoroki, another recommended student, had acknowledged Izuku's status in their class. The two had become close friends following the sports festival and their encounter with Stain. I'm assuming you wouldn't have listened to my words earlier about leaving me behind should the opportunity to pass the exam. Momo had been thinking about those words prior to starting the exam, wondering if her classmate was truly contemplating it or threw it out the window. Izuku smiled at her and surprised the raven-haired girl. No, I had made a promise to become a hero that saves everyone, no matter if the person realizes they need help or not. He thought about his early life of protecting other kids from Kakin and his lackeys, willing to take a beating after beating if it meant those kids could be spared. As he grew older, Izuku never wavered in his dream to become a hero, even if no one believed in him. In a world filled with superpowers, no amount of training could allow him to become a hero, despite his attitude. Although he wouldn't lie about those few, brief moments of questioning his goals. The words of his mentor had made their presence once more. Heroes risk their lives every day. They fight against those wishing to ruin the lives of others. So, no, I don't believe you can become a hero without a quirk. Izuku had a small frown on his face. Sometimes, I still find it hard to believe All Might said those words to me. Despite everything that's happened, he was like everyone, just telling me the reality of my situation. Guess I really am stubborn. I'm glad you have that mindset, Izuku. It suits you. Momo was beginning to realize there was far more to her green-haired classmate than what many liked to believe. That willingness to go and save others wasn't just a switch for him to turn. Those kind words from Momo had caused him to blush. I just did what was right. Leaving you behind wouldn't have sat well with me. Still, I just wanted to say, thank you for still believing in me. Izuku tried to deflect her gratitude. And no, I didn't anything that special. You were able to find the resolve to come up with the plan to beat Mr. Aizawa. I should be the saying thank you, especially after you saved me in that moment. During their final stand against their homeroom teacher, Izuku had been using the smoke grenades to create a cover and started landing hits on the underground hero. This was when he started testing out a new ability to use. Earlier, Momo had mentioned if it was possible for him to create a smaller burst of air similar to the one he used in their first training exercise with All Might. Instead of using his fist, Momo had suggested for him to use his fingers. While he would have protested against such an idea at the beginning of the school year, but after continuing to train and strengthen his body, the ninth inheritor had gone along with the idea. Now, he had a new weapon for long-range encounters as it was a weakness of his. While he was fighting against Mr. Aizawa, Izuku had made a mistake and put way too much power into one of his flicks, blowing away the majority of the smoke. I thought I was finished at that moment. Izuku remembered feeling suddenly drained of power, a sign that their teacher had used his quirk on him. Then, you came along and saved me. If anyone should be saying thank you, it should be me. Momo was lost for words, unsure of what to say to him. During the school year, the raven-haired girl had seen what her classmate was willing to do for others. To hear him say those words to her left quite the impact on Momo. Looks like we both have trouble accepting gratitude. Momo saw Izuku smile in response. Guess we do. Izuku had been worrying about the possibility of saying something stupid and looking like a complete fool in Momo's face. As the two became more relaxed around each other, Izuku never imagined a day he would be talking to Momo. He heard about the conversations between some of the first-year guys, even the second and third years, about her looks, and any guy would be lucky to date her. Izuku never really paid attention to those talks because of his tunnel-like vision. To become a hero was the only thing on his mind these days, especially when taking into consideration the health of his mentor. Romance was the last thing on his mind, but Izuku could admit Momo was a very attractive girl, easily the prettiest among the girls in their class. Out of respect, he always avoided looking at her during their training exercises as the girl had a rather interesting costume, as she had far more skin exposed than normal. Granted, her quirk needed as much skin exposed as possible, but that still didn't make things easier for him. He struggled to have conversations with other people, including his friends. How was someone like him going to be appealing to a girl like Momo? While the ninth inheritor struggled with the reality surrounding his future, he couldn't have realized the raven-haired girl was thinking about a similar problem like him. I remember Ochako telling me about how focused Izuku was on becoming a hero. Anyone with that level of dedication must have been fueled by something. Momo thought his dream to become a hero stemmed from being a fan of All Might. She didn't blame him for following in the man's footsteps as he was considered one of the greatest heroes in their nation's history. Heck, Momo and the others had seen the famous hero take a liking to Izuku, considering her classmate has a strength quirk as well. Then, there were his words during the exam. Sometimes, we have to fall so we can learn to pick ourselves up. Momo suspected Izuku had learned that lesson at some point in his life. She could only wonder what if those words had something to do with his dream. Stop, you're starting to overthink things. Momo had developed a bad habit of trying to figure out her classmates. This meant taking whatever they've said and, now, the class vice president was attempting to solve the puzzle known as Izuku Midoriya. 10. Around the same time. Did you really have to grab my hand like that, Todoroki? Ochako was beyond confused by the actions of her classmate within the past few minutes. He went from criticizing her performance during the final exam to, all of a sudden, grabbing her hand in front of everyone and dragging her away. At first, she attempted to sound upset with him for doing such a thing, but the deep blush on her face wasn't helping her case. It certainly made her realize something about the entire incident. His right side is cold, much colder than I expected. Ochako always been curious about his powers as he was able to utilize ice and fire, but feeling his hand on hers felt very different. Todoroki had let go of her hand. I apologize about the sudden change in behavior. Usually, Ochako didn't have to crane upward to look the dual quirk user in the face. While he wasn't as tall as Ida, it still made her realize the difference between the two of them. Things were already kind tough being among the shorter people in the class. It was made worse while standing next to Todoroki as the difference was exacerbated. So why did you grab my hand like that? Ochako was more curious than upset about the entire thing. In her mind, it wasn't every day when a cute guy like Todoroki did something so out of character for him. I did it because Izuku and Yaoyorozu looked like they needed to talk. Todoroki's answer surprised the brunette, who glanced over in the direction of her green-haired friend and the class vice president. The two seemed to be engrossed in some sort of conversation if the constant back and forth between them was anything to go by. Ochako smiled at the sight, happy to see her close friend acting comfortable with someone else in their class. She had always been concerned about Deku and his issues socializing with other people. Hopefully, he made a new friend in Momo, especially since she was hoping to see those two become friends. Ochako was beginning to understand what her classmate was thinking. You know, you're a really nice person, Todoroki. He shrugged his shoulders. Nice? I really doubt it. More like I was just returning the favor. Favor? Todoroki realized what he said and silently cursed himself for being so relaxed. He tried to come up with a cover story on the spot. He saved my ass during the encounter with Stain. I figure whatever is happening between him and Yaoyorozu. I thought, why not? And tried to help him out. Little early to think that, isn't it? Ochako giggled, finding amusement at the idea of her close friend and the vice president becoming an item. Who knows? At least, he'll start breaking out of his shell. Ochako nodded, understanding the reasoning behind leaving those two alone. After he finished saying those words, both of them had become silent as neither of them knew what to say. Ochako glanced at her classmate and saw him looking at the monitor displaying another matchup. This brief moment had allowed the gravity quirk user to examine his face. A lot of the girls in their class talked about Todoroki being the best-looking guy in the class. While she was around for those conversations, Ochako never really agreed or disagreed with their thoughts. Now, the girl was given an opportunity to see for herself. Despite the burn mark, it really doesn't take away from his looks. If I'm being honest, he looks kind of handsome with it. Ochako felt her cheeks grow warmer, which prompted the gravity quirk user to slap her cheeks. The sound was quite loud and attracted the attention of the boy standing next to her. Todoroki raised an eyebrow. You okay? Why, yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about something. Ochako waved her hands while blushing as hard as ever. Thinking about what? Ochako was about to panic and blurted the first thing that came to mind. About why you called Deku by his first name? That's it. Huh. She watched as Todoroki let out a snort in amusement before letting out what could be seen as a real chuckle from the dual quirk user. It must be weird, right? What? You calling him by his first name? I don't blame anyone for being curious about that, Todoroki said to her. Ochako didn't expect him to take her question seriously. Now, she was actually wondering what was the reason behind the change. He usually refers to everyone by their last name, but not Deku. If I had to explain my reasoning, I just respect Izuku more than most people. He, unlike others, has a drive that almost can't be matched. If someone is willing to shatter their limbs and suffer pain as our green-haired friend has in the past, definitely someone to take seriously, no matter what. I'm not trying to sound like an asshole or make any of you feel ashamed. The dual quirk user knew a lot of people would take offense to the way he was explaining his reasoning. She shook her head. I know you didn't mean to upset me or anyone with that. How would you know that? Ochako smiled at him. As I said, you're a nice person, despite what you may think about yourself. As what had happened earlier with Ochako, the dual quirk user felt a warm feeling his chest as he saw the smile on her face. The only sign of his embarrassment was a slight tinge of pink on his cheeks and him turning away from her face. He cleared his throat. Thank you, Uraraka. Ochako thought about the idea of being friends with Todoroki and decided to take the first step in that direction. If you want, you can call me by my first name. The boy didn't say anything, causing her to wonder if she may have made a bit uncomfortable with her suggestion. She spoke up. Oh, only if you want to. It's fine if you want to keep calling me by my last na. No, Todoroki interrupted her. I'm more surprised than anything else. Didn't think anyone would want me to call them by their first name. If you're comfortable with that, then I guess it's only fair if I extend the same offer to you, Ochako. Sure thing, Shoto. Chapter 8. Struggles and Surprises. Friday night. When the finals had concluded for the week, Momo and the others had to sit through boring speeches from each of their respective teachers about their overall performance. The raven-haired girl was more than happy to receive feedback from a professional such as Mr. Aizawa, who had quite a bit to say about her and Izuku's performance, regardless if it was positive or negative. After the week finally came to a conclusion, Momo was more than happy to go home and get some rest from everything that's happened these last few days. Although, she was a bit disappointed at how little she was able to speak with Izuku throughout the days that followed. Not only did her duties as the class vice president keep her extremely occupied during lunch and after school to finish some last-minute work before their final 2 days of the term next week, but Izuku never really went out of his way to speak to her after the finals came to an end. Momo began to wonder if she said something that offended him or had overstepped her boundaries. The raven-haired girl was thinking they were slowly on their way to becoming friends after their first real conversation in the main lobby, where they got a chance to talk to each other. Except for his behavior in the following days had baffled the class vice president, such as avoiding eye contact and finding an excuse to never speak to her, were just the tip of the iceberg. So did I miss something while I was taking my exam? 'Cause I never imagined you, the great Momo Yaoyorozu, falling in love with Izuku Midoriya. Momo blushed at what her best friend was trying to say about them. I am not in love with Izuku Midoriya. It was a Friday night, and Momo was sitting at a desk with a textbook open to some random page about the molecular structure of iron. In reality, the raven-haired girl had been talking with her best friend for the past hour about what happened throughout the exam. From students like Bakugo and Todoroki failing their exam, the pervert managing to pass against midnight, and some other stuff that happened during the exam. One of them was the rumors surrounding her and Izuku. Don't try and deny it. Kyuka had been constantly teasing her about Izuku. Momo groaned after hearing those words. We talked for a bit during the exam. There is nothing happening between us. Why is that so hard for people to understand? Hey, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with dating him, Kyuka replied in an amused tone, enjoying how much she was able to tease her best friend over the rumors. Apparently, people were curious as to why Izuku and Momo were talking to each other in another part of the main lobby. It spiraled out of control as some people, most likely a certain invisible girl and pink-skinned girl with horns, thought something was happening between them. Now, the two were dealing with people in their respective friend groups, asking if they were dating or liked each other. The class vice president had the benefit of being too busy to worry about it. On top of that, Ida hardly talked about anything that wasn't related to school and, much to her relief, disliked gossip. The same could not be said for her best friend, Kyukijiro, as she was taking any opportunity to tease her about them. Momo struggled to find a response before sighing in exasperation. Can we talk about something other than Izuku? Oh, you guys are first-name basis, damn girl. You're impossible, you know that? Momo was torn between giggling and groaning. She could imagine the smirk on her best friend's face. I think being your best friend means I have free access to teasing someone about their love life, or, in your case, a non-existent one. That's quite rude to say. Hyuka could be heard laughing on the other end. Maybe you can change that non-existent love life. I remember our certain green-haired classmate is single and not bad-looking. So why not give it a shot? For the past hour, Momo had been trying to steer the topic away from her partner for the exam and talk about something much more mundane. She was supposed to be focused on becoming a hero. In fact, Momo dreamed about becoming the first hero in her family's history, a dream she was fighting to keep alive. Looking towards the picture frame sitting on her desk, Momo was met with the stoic expression of her mother and the smile on her father's face. It was made worse when seeing the fake smile plastered on her own face as she stood between them like a barrier. You already know why I'm not too keen on romance. How are things with your mother? It's been a while since you guys fought, right? Kyuka was aware of the unfortunate home situation her best friend was facing. Other than Kyuka, not a single other individual was aware of the poor relationship between mother and daughter. Momo was intent on keeping her home life private, and the idea of dating anyone might make the situation even worse. Plus, the raven-haired girl doubted any guy might be willing to stick around if they ever had the unfortunate pleasure of meeting her mother. If it wasn't for her father, Momo suspected she might have forced her way out of their home before she started high school. The only source of encouragement in her life had been her father. Even with his busy schedule and constantly being away on business trips, the man always called, texted, or video chats to keep in touch. Momo tried to keep her emotions in check as the memories came flooding back. WL, I, tried to be reasonable with her, saying how I passed the exam and she could already feel the tears in her eyes. It didn't, go well. Hyuko was forced to listen to her best friend slowly starting to break down. Most people would like to assume Momo, the rich girl, would never have problems in life. To those people, Hyuko wanted to strangle those idiots and make them realize everyone has problems in their lives. It's why she had been willing to answer calls from her raven-haired friend during the middle of the night and listen to her vent about whatever was happening. Much to her dismay, the arguments between Momo and her mother had been happening more often as the school year progressed. Hyuka remembered how this happened maybe once or twice a week, but it was starting to get worse as they were almost a daily occurrence for Momo. Hey, Hyuka thought about getting her friend out of the house, hoping some space might alleviate the tension in her house. Why don't we hang out? Heck, we could even invite your future boyfriend and his friends along. Momo had remained silent for a moment, letting out a sniffle. I think some time away from the house might, be good for me. Finally, you're not denying him being your boyfriend down the road. Hyuka was thankful her friend had agreed to the idea. Plus, the chance to see her best friend and their green-haired classmate in an environment not called school was going to give her ammunition for later. A small blush could be seen on Momo's face. Shut up. Maybe it might do me some good. Hopefully, Mother doesn't get too upset about me leaving the house. Momo tried to stay positive as she was fearful at the idea of placing too much of a burden on the shoulder of her best friend. Life's not fair, huh? 10. Around the same time. Good. Young Midoriya, I can see you're finally starting to get a better grasp on One for All. Izuku felt like his arms and legs were nothing more than jelly after the last few hours of training with All Might. Ever since the exams came to a close, the ninth inheritor had been convinced about needing to train more often. It was the main reason as to why he pestered the #1 hero about helping him train during the upcoming summer and further his development with the mighty quirk. Beyond the desire to improve, Izuku had been left thinking about the origin of the quirk and how someday he was going to have to face the immortal symbol of evil as the next wielder of this power. All for one. The sports festival, hero internship, and the final exams were all worthy distractions from the looming threat of this individual. Yet, Izuku couldn't deny his apprehension about facing such a powerful opponent. If this man has been truly around since the beginning, Izuku could only imagine the different quirks stored inside All for One. His mentor had fought the man, but it wasn't enough as the villain was able to escape as well as leaving the famous hero in a crippled state. Society had believed All Might was an invincible shield, capable of repelling any villain or criminal stupid enough to harm others, for almost 30 years. Izuku knew people relied on his mentor to protect them. Even he was guilty of thinking about All Might in such a light. Along with his mentor's rapidly declining health and control over the quirk, Izuku was quite disappointed in his performance during the exam. He hadn't progressed with the quirk as much as he was hoping. Heck, the only reason why he was able to stay in the fight against their homeroom teacher was because of the suggestion from his raven-haired partner about creating an air bullet with his immense strength. It made him wonder if he was going to be able to master the quirk and fulfill the role as the symbol of peace. Why do I think about such depressing things? Izuku berated himself for going down such a dark path. His brain likes to wander into places like the future, despite All Might telling him to focus on the present. Izuku had always heard from his mother about how quickly high school can pass. Something about how it can be over in the blink of an eye. Tom was not going to be on his side. Not now or ever. Young Midoriya? Izuku had been sitting against a concrete wall as the two were using one of the many training facilities on the school campus, taking a moment to breathe and reflect on the past 2 hours, when he heard the familiar voice of his mentor. Did you need something, All Might? The #1 hero was wearing nothing more than some pants and a white dress shirt with his sleeves rolled up. Instead of being in buff form, the hero was in his real form while addressing his successor. I asked how you're feeling after the exams. You and your partner were able to turn the match around at the end, but I would be careful going forward. Villains aren't going to give heroes a second chance to beat them or all them to work through whatever issues are between them. I understand, Izuku replied in a solemn tone. Tashinori had noticed his successor acting far quieter than usual. Most of the time, the green-haired boy took any opportunity to ask him questions about anything hero-related. Curious as to what was behind the boy's silence, Tashinori had sat down next to him. "What's wrong, my boy?" Izuku didn't say anything, preferring to keep silent. This made the number one hero sigh in exasperation. "Young Midoriya, if there's something troubling you, it's okay to talk to me." Ever since meeting his successor, Tashinori had learned a few things about the young boy sitting next to him. From how much Izuku loved heroes, wanting to learn as much as possible about other quirks, and his infamous ability to mutter. All those little tics had defined him, and it was jarring to see the young boy acting in such a reserved manner in the nearly 2 years they've come to know each other. Honestly, it was kind of scaring the number one hero. The silence had finally been broken with a question from Izuku. "All Might, do you think I'll ever be ready?" "Already? For what?" Tashinori was baffled at what his successor was trying to ask him. Was he still concerned about the future? All for one, becoming the symbol of peace? It made the number one hero sigh. "Kid, you don't need to worry about the future. You're acting as if the whole world will crumble when I eventually retire. There are still heroes like Endeavor, Hawks, and many other willing to step." He never wanted Izuku to worry about mastering his quirk as quickly as possible or breaking his bones to make any progress with One for All. He continued speaking. "Besides, you're still just a high school student. I think you should be more worried about those rumors about you and Miss Yaoyorozu than All for One." He said the last part with a smile on his face. "How do you know about those rumors?" Izuku's head was in his hands, letting out a groan. "Young Midoriya, teachers may not care much for student gossip, but we do keep an ear out for them." Tashinori had been quite surprised to hear about people thinking those two were dating or something was happening between them. He learned they were seen talking to each other following their exam. Izuku felt like he could die from embarrassment, especially after hearing his mentor had heard them. "We just talked for a good while, but that doesn't mean anything is happening between us." "Do you?" What? In his life, Tashinori had never really bothered with romance or starting a family. He was content with being the number one hero, acting as the symbol of peace for millions across the country, and becoming the mentor to the next wielder of One for All. Plus, the man couldn't have imagined many women being content with the idea of being with someone who looks as if they belong in the hospital on a permanent basis or finding his real form attractive in their eyes. He looked down at his successor. "I mean, would you be opposed to the idea of dating Miss Yaoyorozu?" "I don't know. That was the first time we, ever talked so, and maybe, or maybe not." The uncertainty in his voice was enough to answer the pro-hero's question. To be in such a position, especially for someone like Izuku, couldn't have been easy. Tashinori knew about the boy's issues when it came to interacting with others. This must have meant talking to girls was always going to be a challenge for him. In the back of his head, the possibility of him being bullied in his youth must have been quite vicious for someone to behave in such a skittish manner. Now, Izuku was forced to deal with rumors about him and Miss Yaoyorozu. "Look, I'm not the most experienced person when it comes to love, romance, or anything of that sort. You know that, young Midoriya. The only thing I can tell you is this much. Whatever you're feeling, just go with it. Every hero knows the danger that comes with this job. Sometimes, we come home to our families. Other times, we come back in a casket. If you do feel something for her, this may be a chance to experience something pretty rare in our profession. Or, it could teach you a valuable lesson." Izuku didn't know what to say to his mentor. God, why does everything have to be so complicated? All for one, Momo, the upcoming training camp. I wonder if this crazy ride is ever going to end. He wondered what his classmates might say if they ever heard some of the things in his head. Without saying anything, Izuku got up from the concrete wall and took a moment to stretch. If his mind was going to continue annoying him with such troublesome thoughts, the ninth inheritor decided to focus on his training and worry about these things later. He looked down at All Might. "See, can we worry about my non-existent social and love life some other time?" "Fine, but don't think we're done with this discussion. Now, let's hurry and wrap up your training for the day." Tashinori decided to back down and give the boy some space, as he probably had a lot of things floating around in his head. 10. A few days later, Izuku thought he was used to feeling pain, as his quirk forced him to break bones on a regular basis before creating full cowl. Getting smacked on the head by Recovery Girl was another form of pain he was forced to deal with after breaking his limbs. However, none of those compared to sparring against the #1 hero of their country. He had come to regret his decision, as All Might had made him realize why criminals never really lasted more than a few hits in a battle. Thankfully, the pain wasn't for nothing, as the hero managed to get a better grasp on One for All. It's like his body was naturally terrified at the idea of fighting the #1 hero and, to his surprise, forced him to access something higher than normal. His control over the quirk had slowly risen from 5% to 8%. Maybe it was from sheer dumb luck, or his body finally capable of handling a much higher percentage of One for All. Whatever the reason behind his newfound control, Izuku was more than happy being able to use more of this quirk in his journey to becoming a hero. As the ninth inheritor thought about his situation, he was currently riding the train to school, as this was going to be a short week. While he would have been happy to continue his education, there was a very big reason as to why he was nervous about today. It had something to do with a certain beautiful, raven-haired girl. In the days following their exam, Izuku had assumed the conversation between him and Momo was going to be a one-time event. His mind was arguing that no girl would find him interesting enough to be friends with him, but people like Uraraka proved it wrong. Still, he allowed his previous history to influence him in the days that followed. She must hate me. Izuku had basically avoided interacting with Momo. From avoiding eye contact, never really going out of his way to talk to her, and acting like nothing happened. He couldn't help it, especially after dealing with girls treating him like a joke back in middle school. Izuku leaned back against the seat, tilting his head back while listening to whatever song was playing through his headphones. Part of him could only imagine how upset she must be with him. Walking into the classroom was going to be very awkward for him. As he felt the train come to a stop, Izuku already knew this was going to be his stop. In the distance, he could see the familiar enormous glass building known across Japan for teaching the next generation of heroes. The joy of seeing the school was replaced with a sense of dread. It was an odd feeling, to say the least, about his dream school. The train had finally come to a stop and allowing its passengers to disembark onto the platform. Izuku had stood up from his seat. Time to face the music for screwing up badly with Momo. When he stepped off the train, there was a familiar scene of people going about their business. The green-haired teenager walked through the station, trying his best to walk as slowly as possible without being late to class. He didn't want to incur the wrath of Ida, knowing his friend was always concerned with everyone being on time for school. The rest of his walk to school was relatively peaceful, despite the thoughts running amok in his head about seeing Momo. Izuku had been lost in his thoughts until he noticed someone was ahead of him. Shoto, he quietly muttered, surprised to see his friend so early in the morning. He's never been one to show up earlier. Izuku knew his friend enjoyed sleeping more than someone might believe. The dual quirk user trained more than what some people might imagine, as he was the son of Endeavor. The training he experienced was more brutal than anything most people in their class experienced on a regular basis, and it meant he loved sleeping more than some people could imagine. Before he could call out to his friend, someone had beaten him to the punch. Shoto, good morning. The last person he expected to greet the son of Endeavor was Uraraka. He stopped walking for a moment and looked as the brunette approached Shoto, leaving him beyond confused. Maybe there was some truth to those two wanting some alone time. Izuku watched as they seemed to talk to each other, a sight he never imagined happening anytime soon. Or happening at any point in time. Chapter 9, A Rocky First Step. That same day, never imagined my day getting started with witnessing Shoto waking up early and willingly talking with Uraraka. Izuku thought he was going crazy after seeing his two closest friends walking together to school. He knew Shoto wanted to make good on his promise to interact with their classmates more often after the sports festival, but Izuku was expecting the dual quirk user to try and make friends with Ida, as they already knew each other. Granted, there was certainly nothing wrong with Shoto getting to know Uraraka. In fact, he was happy to see them getting along with each other. If Uraraka was comfortable with using his first name, Izuku suspected something must have happened between them during the exams last week. He kept a good distance away from them, allowing the two of them to speak without him around. Or, it seems like Uraraka was doing most of the talking between them, but Izuku noticed how Shoto seemed to be paying attention to her and seemingly replying either through nods or short answers. Some people might think he was being curt with Uraraka. To Izuku, on the other hand, he would disagree with them. In his mind, Shoto was being the most talkative or attentive he's ever been during the entire school year when it came to his behavior around their other classmates. Izuku was glad to see someone other than him get through the tough shell known as Shoto Todoroki, and after everything his friend has been through, he deserves it. Izuku watched the scene with a smile before he remembered about a certain raven-haired girl. Unlike me, Shoto is willing to try. I screwed it up with Momo, and now she probably hates for me suddenly acting like she doesn't exist. The smile had vanished from his face as it was quickly replaced with a frown. He had been trying to muster the courage needed to face the class vice president, but was failing miserably to do so. Meanwhile, Izuku had been too busy thinking about his friends, training, and situation with Momo to realize someone was approaching him from behind. This lack of focus afforded a certain raven-haired girl the opportunity to speak with him. Except, she was facing a similar problem to Izuku. Momo decided to ask her driver if they could head out earlier in the morning than usual. Honestly, it was a combination of two things, a desire to avoid seeing her mother as well as wanting a chance to talk with Izuku in private. The best time for the latter would be in the morning, especially since Momo didn't want to attract any attention to them and make things awkward between them. Why you can do this? The raven-haired girl was torn between calling out to him or chickening out. She blamed Kyuka for putting this idea into her head during the weekend. If they were serious about inviting Izuku and his friends to hang out, it would require her to go up to him and actually speak to him, something she hadn't done since the final exam. Momo had walked a bit faster to close the distance between them. After deciding she was close enough, the raven-haired girl called out to him, "Izuku." In an instant, the green-haired boy seems to stumble in surprise and stopped walking. He slowly turned his head in her direction, causing a feeling of unease in Momo. Thankfully, Uraraka and Todoroki were too far away from them to hear her calling out Izuku's name. It would be possible to imagine how embarrassed she would feel if they did hear. God, it was already bad enough dealing with Kyuka's teasing on a regular basis, but adding Izuku's close friends would be the death of her. And Momo. Huh. The raven-haired girl could only mutter a single word. Izuku gripped the straps of his book bag with a tight grip. I heard you call my name." "That's right," Momo answered back, sounding unsure as ever. He tried to stay calm as he wasn't expecting to see her so early in the morning like right now. "Do you, and need something from me?" "Yes, I did want to ask you something." Momo quickly noticed the nervous expression on Izuku's face and, despite the embarrassment she was feeling, asked the question she's been wrestling with since her conversation with Kyuka. "I know we haven't known each other for long. I completely understand if you're uncomfortable after hearing me out. However, there's a question that's been on my mind for the last few days." Izuku's eyes widened in surprise, feeling his heart rate starting skyrocket. All he did was nod his head in response to her question. His mind went back to the conversation between him and All Might during their training session during the weekend. Izuku didn't know what to expect from Momo. During his time in middle school, he was forced to deal with girls relentlessly making fun of him and playing cruel pranks on him, leaving fake love letters in his desk, humiliating him, and playing with his emotions by faking confessions as a sort of rite of passage. All these experiences made him hesitant about what might happen. Yet, he wanted to believe no one in his class was going to perform such a cruel act on him. Momo has proven to be a kind person, willing to take on the burden of being the class vice president, and, much like everyone, have problems like any other person. These reasons made him want to believe she was going to ask him a very simple question. What if she's going to ask? Izuku struggled to finish that particular thought. He refused to believe Momo was going to ask him out. There are far better guys in their class than him, especially compared to someone like Shoto. Why would Momo waste her time with him? "I was wondering if you were busy today after school." Izuku struggled to respond to her. "Well, I don't have much planned, for tea today. That's good. Momo felt a surge of excitement at hearing him say that. So, I and Kyuko were planning on hanging out after school today. You know, since today is the final day of the term and it is a short day, we were wondering if you wanted to come along with us. Why you want me to hang out with you and Jiro? She returned a hesitant nod, unsure of what he was going to say. We thought it would be like a mini celebration for passing the first term exams. You and I know if it wasn't for you, neither of us would have passed the exam. So, think of it as another way of me saying thank you. Throughout his life, Izuku likes to think he was pretty unlucky after everything he's experienced. Now, he was being asked to hang out with a girl as beautiful as Momo Yaoyorozu. Maybe One for All wasn't trying to sabotage his life. And if you want, you can ask if Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki if they want to come along too, Momo added, hoping her classmate would agree to the idea if he was allowed to bring his friends with them. Thankfully, it looked as if those were the magic words as Izuku's posture seemed to relax after hearing those words from her. Momo was grateful for the suggestion from Kyuka to make sure their classmate was comfortable with accepting the offer. Oh, really? Momo smiled at him. Of course, we are more than happy to get to hang out with them. Yeah, I will ask if they want to join. Izuku was glad to know he wouldn't be alone with two girls. It was already tough just talking to Momo right now, but adding in someone like Jiro, who he's never really spoken to either, it made things a lot easier. The excitement hidden beneath his words made Momo hopeful about his answer. Does this mean you'll come? It would be rude to turn down your offer. Izuku knew he wouldn't have to get over his anxiety if he planned to become a hero and, in general, have a life. I would be happy to hang out with Yu and Jiro. You will? Momo, in her excitement, closed the distance between them and hugged her classmate. At that moment, Izuku began blushing and tried to speak, but couldn't get the words to come out of his mouth. His brain overloaded as he quickly realized what was happening. There's a real girl hugging me. I think the only girl who's hugged me is my mother. And now I don't know if that's sad or not. Am I freaking out? 'Cause it feels like I'm freaking out. To him, physical contact with a girl was a foreign idea. He was used to getting beaten up, cursed out, and made to feel like utter garbage. High school was supposed to be a brand new start for him after everything he's been through, and these last few days have been a complete turnaround from. Momo, the most beautiful girl in class, was hugging him after hearing him, the lonely and timid Izuku, saying yes to her question. As he was confused, happy, and embarrassed about everything happening at this moment, the same can be said for Momo. Oh God, what am I doing? She began panicking at her actions and immediately moved away from Izuku. It was impossible to hide the blush on her face and made a very snap decision. Sorry. I'll see you in class, Izuku. Without giving him a chance to say anything, Momo walked past him and tried to get to class. In the wake of her decision, she missed the frown on his face and the words he muttered afterward. Did I do something wrong? 10. Later that day, who would have imagined the rich and beautiful Momo Yaoyorozu and the timid but heroic Izuku Midoriya spending time together? Momo let out a groan. Kyuka, please drop it. I was terrified of what Izuku was going to say to me. I think I was close to creating a Russian nesting doll out of embarrassment. If he didn't say yes. The two friends were sitting on a bench, waiting for their green-haired classmate and his friends. They had gotten their answer when Todoroki, the last person anyone imagined relaying news, had told Momo about them agreeing to come along. At the very least, the raven-haired girl didn't have to worry about her potential friend feeling nervous about being alone with two girls. Kyuka smirked and crossed her arms over her chest. And, instead of creating said Russian nesting doll, you decided to hug the boy. Don't talk about it. Momo put her face into her hands, hiding the atomic red blush. I was just happy to hear his answer and lost control for a moment. God, I feel so ashamed of myself. Stop freaking out. Momo turned towards her friend with an incredulous look. What do you mean stop freaking out? How do you expect me not to freak out in this situation? Momo, I love you like a sister, but I think you're overreacting here. Kyuka resisted the urge to grab her friend by the shoulder and shaking her. Despite being the smartest person in the class, Momo seems to struggle with certain social cues. The raven-haired girl sighed before asking the question that's been on her mind for most of the school day. Do you think I made a mistake by hugging him? Hyuka knew her friend wanted to hear the truth. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's the hug you should be worried about. Huh? Momo. Hyuka was surprised by how unaware of her actions. You hugged Midoriya, reacted pretty quick, and just left him alone. I'm sure any guy would be confused by your actions. Hell, he might take it poorly if these last few months have proved anything about him. To hear those words was enough to make Momo realize what she had done. It wasn't a secret among the class about Izuku's lack of confidence, and his relationship with Bakugo only proved what a few of them were thinking. Out of everyone, Bakugo showed the most hostility to Izuku. No one deserved to face such treatment, and Momo had watched their interactions with concern. Now, she's forced to mull over the possibility of Izuku thinking he made a mistake or did something wrong. Momo has to fix this mess or risk losing a potential friendship with him. I never meant to leave such an impression. Hyuka noticed Momo looking away in a mixture of embarrassment and anxiety while twisting her front bang. Look, you're gonna have to solve this mess on your own, Hyuka told her friend in a pretty blunt manner. I guess you're right. Momo knew there was only so much her friend could do for her. Cheer up, Hyuka decided to steer the conversation away from the awkward incident. I'm sure you and Midoriya are going to patch things up since we're going to be with him and his friends today. Besides, I'm rooting for you. Are rooting for me. The purple-haired girl stared at her with a blank expression before shaking her head. Geez, you read all those romance novels. And yet, I still can't believe how oblivious you are sometimes. Momo couldn't help but apologize. Sorry. Seeing the downtrodden expression on her friend's face, Hyuka shrugged her shoulders. Don't worry about it too much. The one thing Momo has come to appreciate about Hyuka was her willingness to say whatever was on her mind, regardless of what others might think. It was moments like these that made her glad to know Hyuka was in her corner. If it wasn't for her, Momo had a feeling she would have been completely lost in this kind of situation involving Izuku. Boys weren't exactly her strong suit, and Momo was beyond terrified for what might happen today. She could already imagine how awkward things might get. I hope he doesn't hate me or think I'm weird for hugging him. Momo, lost in her thoughts, completely missed the fact that Hyuka was trying to get her to come back to reality. Hey, she whispered harshly, using her earphone jacks to poke the raven-haired girl in the cheek. I think you might want to wake up. Unfortunately, it was too late as Hyuka saw Midoriya and his friends coming towards them, and, even from this distance, could hear the heartbeat of someone. Although, she had a sneaking suspicion that a certain green-haired classmate was trying his hardest to remain calm. To no one's surprise, Hyuka saw the nervous expression on Midoriya's face and smirked. I really hope these two aren't going to be stubborn about this. And I probably just jinxed it, didn't I? She wasn't alone in thinking about the potential friendship between these two classmates, as a certain dual quirk user and along with a brown-haired gravity quirk user had similar thoughts about their friends. Along with a conversation that took place between Izuku and Shoto before they left their classroom to meet with the two girls. 10. A few minutes earlier. And Momo really hugged me, and then just left. Izuku couldn't help but repeat those same words for the past few hours. He was unable to stop thinking about what happened between them. It prevented him from focusing on class and tried to come up with a reason as to why she did that. Even a lecture from All Might, his mentor and idol, wasn't enough to make him focus in class. Heck, Mr. Aizawa couldn't pull him from the depths of his mind. Much like his teachers, Izuku's classmates didn't seem to look at him or try to talk to him. He usually answered a couple of questions during class, but was pretty much silent throughout the day. Izuku was quite thankful that no one noticed the silence from him. Or, Izuku believed no one had noticed. Trouble in paradise? Shoto was never the kind of person to mince his words, and Izuku was slowly getting used to it. I don't want to talk about it. Izuku attempted to shut down the conversation. Neither of them had to worry about anyone being in the classroom, as everyone was too busy talking to their respective groups about their plans for the summer, getting together with friends, and preparing for the training camp in August. Meanwhile, Izuku and Shoto were near the former's desk as they were waiting for Uraraka and Ida to finish packing. Izuku would have been hesitant to talk about his troubles if the person sitting in front of him was present. To his amazement, Kakin had pretty much gathered his things and left the classroom. His only sign of hostility was the glare directed towards them, especially Shoto, before walking out the door. I'm assuming it involves Yaoyorozu, Shoto said as more of a statement than a question. Izuku had leaned back in his chair and covered his face with his hands. Am I really that easy to read? You're not the hardest person to see through. I figured as much. Izuku sighed after hearing the answer from his friend. He looked at his friends and asked him, So, what made you agree to this idea? I never expected you to say yes to hanging out. You don't seem like the kind of person to like this stuff. And not that there's anything wrong with it. Shoto kept the blank look on his face. No, you're right. I'm not the biggest fan of them. So, what made you want to join us? Izuku raised an eyebrow, curious about his friend's reasoning, as it wasn't every day Shoto acted like this. Ochako said it's fun when friends hang out together. His answer was completely unexpected as Izuku didn't think the first word out of his mouth was going to be Uraraka's first name. After hearing her name, Izuku wondered if something really did happen between them. Shoto was a lot like him, especially when it came to being formal with people. That included using their last names unless the other person said it was okay. He cleared his throat. Didn't know you guys were close. Wouldn't say we're close or anything. I mean, I don't think I was going to be able to avoid Ochako or Ida. You can say it was inevitable of me talking to them. Shoto attempted to explain his reasoning, but the slight smile on Izuku's face was kind of annoying him. Izuku decided to do something a bit different than normal for him. Are you sure that's the reason as to why you're coming with us? Is it because of Uraraka? I do not like where you're going with that question. Shoto narrowed his eyes at Izuku, not allowing the conversation to head in that particular direction. His older sister was already bugging him, noticing his subtle changes in behavior, like texting more often on his phone and seeming more relaxed than ever before. Fumi was already starting to question if he found a girlfriend at his high school. What do you mean? Izuku tried to play innocent, but was doing a poor job of it. It got a glare from the dual quirk user. We just talk. That's it. Oh, okay. You don't have to be mean about it. The friendship between Izuku and Shoto was an unusual one as it started because of a fight during the sports festival. In the aftermath of their fight, both had come to respect each other and slowly became friends in the days that followed. It meant they had learned a few things about each other, and Izuku came to realize how Shoto despised the idea of being teased by anyone, including those from his family. Good. I'm glad we established that fact. Shoto seemed to lose the edge in his voice and went back to its usual tone. And don't attempt to change the conversation again. Izuku let out a groan. Why? Look, whatever is happening with Yaoyorozu is seriously affecting you. Shoto never imagined having a friend in a situation like this one. In fact, he never really pictured having any friends throughout high school. He saw the expression on Izuku's face and noticed the somber look on it. If you want to blame someone for why I'm acting like a friend, I'm looking right at him. Izuku was shocked to hear those words. He struggled to find the appropriate words to respond, and the ninth inheritor wouldn't need to do so. Another thing, Shoto spoke up, catching his attention. Whatever happened between you two needs to be resolved. I think I realize why people hate seeing someone act so indecisive about these kinds of matters. Unlike most people, Yaoyorozu doesn't seem like the kind of person to simply invite a boy out of the blue like this. Aye. Izuku wanted to retort against his friend's words. He felt a hand on his shoulders, forcing Izuku to look up at Shoto's face. Answer this simple question. Do you want to hang out with Yaoyorozu? Why, yes. Good. Shoto was glad to hear his answer. Now, you need to forget about this morning. I refuse to watch you squander an opportunity to make a friend in Yaoyorozu. Shoto removed his hand from Izuku's shoulder and gestured towards the door, where Uraraka and Ida were standing with their belongings. The dual quirk user called out to him. Come on, I doubt Jiro and Yaoyorozu are going to tolerate us being late. 10. Present time, back with Izuku. Momo was terrified at the possible reaction from Izuku, someone she imagined didn't take lightly to the contact between them, but tried to remain as calm as possible. Even if she was worried, it didn't mean the girl could be rude to the others. I must thank the both of you for inviting us. The class vice president knew Ida could be overbearing at times. but she knew the speedster was quite expressive of his opinions, regardless if it was about the rules or being with his friends. Hyuka, still sitting next to her on the bench, waved him off. "Don't sweat it, class press. The two of us thought it would be fun to invite some of our classmates to hang out. Our first summer as high school students is something to celebrate, especially with the upcoming training camp. Things are only going to get tougher from here on out." The next person to say anything was, surprisingly, Todoroki. "I have to agree with Ida. The chance to get to know my classmates better is something I couldn't pass up. So, I just want to say thanks for letting me come along." No one really knew what to say to their stoic classmate, unsure of what prompted him to be more open with them. Now, the first person to say anything was another shocker. "I have to agree with Shoto." Everyone, including Momo, knew how much Izuku didn't like to express his thoughts like Todoroki. She watched as he scratched his cheek in a nervous manner and spoke to them. Getting to hang out with people seemed like a lot of fun, and Shoto is right about getting to know some of our classmates better. Who knows? Maybe they could become really good friends down the road. When he said those final words, Momo noticed him glancing in her direction. Is he talking about me? She wanted to believe he was referring to her, but the raven-haired girl had to keep her expectations reasonable, as there could be a chance he was talking about everyone in a general sense. As she thought about his words, Hyuka nodded and smiled at the two boys. "Damn, you guys already earned a few points in my book for those words. If these two could become friends. Granted, I don't think it's going to take an all-out fight to convince any of us to be friends." Hyuka bumped into Momo's shoulder. "You agree with me, right, Yamamoto?" "Why, yes. I have to agree with Hyuka as well." Momo looked away in embarrassment at being caught off guard at the moment. She even twirled her front bang. "I think it would be worthwhile to get to know my other classmates better." Meanwhile, Izuku watched her reaction with interest as he couldn't help but find it cute. His eyes slightly widened. "W8, where the hell did that thought come from?" He already had a similar thought during the final exam and was concerned about another one popping up. The conversation with All Might was something to think about, but Izuku didn't want to deal with those thoughts in a situation like this. Along with his usual problems, he never expected to worry about girls on his mind. "So what do you guys want to do?" Hyuka's sudden question had gathered the attention of everyone. "I wouldn't mind getting something to munch on since it was only a half day." Ida and Shoto agreed with her idea to get something to eat. Uraraka had been hesitant about the idea, but Izuku and a few others noticed her and Shoto exchanging a brief look before agreeing as well. "What about you two?" Hyuka asked him and Momo. "You guys down for some food?" Izuku, trying to take the next steps in his journey to become a better person, agreed with her. "I could go for some food." While he had given an answer, Izuku noticed Momo hadn't said anything in response to her question. It caused everyone to look in her direction. "Come on, Yamamoto." Hyuka placed her arm around the girl's shoulder. "I'm sure you're interested in tasting the food of us poor commoners." Momo dropped her embarrassment and adopted a brief look of amusement. "Do you ever stop making such comments?" she asked her best friend, despite knowing the answer. "Nope," Hyuka said while shaking her head. "So you're down for some food?" She rolled her eyes but gave an answer. "Yes, I would be happy to eat a meal with everyone." When everyone agreed on the idea of eating, it caused a problem to arise. They needed to make the difficult decision of finding a place, and the biggest problem was making sure everyone was okay with the choice of the group. And, surprising everyone once more, was Izuku bringing a suggestion to the table. "Do you mind if I throw an idea out there?" He was hesitant about his suggestion, knowing it might not be a popular choice. "Hey, no one's stopping you. If you got a place, then say it," Hyuka told him, getting a nod from the others in the group. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. How do you guys feel about American food?" Chapter 10. The Group is Born. American. Momo didn't know what to expect from anyone, especially since she's never spent time with anyone outside the classroom other than Hyuka. The raven-haired girl was already prepared to try something new, but to hear that kind of suggestion from Izuku was surprising to Momo. Although, she barely knew anything about her green-haired classmate other than his love for heroes, willingness to help others, and is quite timid. Those were the only qualities she was familiar with about him. It led to Momo asking the question that came to mind. "Do you know a place which serves that kind of food?" She watched Izuku hesitantly nodded and smiled sheepishly. Why, yeah. I've been to the place a few times with my mom, and, He seems to pause mid-sentence and suddenly going quiet. This earned the attention of everyone, as the first one to say anything was Momo. Izuku, are you alright? Uh. We asked if you were okay, Midoriya. Kyuka said, wondering what must have caused him to pause like that. You kinda made us worry there for a second. Oh. Izuku muttered before shaking his head and replying. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. As I said, I know the place. My mom and I know the owner of the place. Everyone, including Momo, noticed how Izuku seems to brush over their concerns. Momo remembered hearing from Ochako about their green-haired classmate who was willing to help others but never bothers to worry about his personal safety at times. She could probably guess the same attitude extended to his personal problems, which could be really unhealthy for someone. Cool. Kyuka tried to move towards a more positive topic as the musically talented girl could tell the atmosphere was a bit awkward after Midoriya clearly ignored their concerns. She knew it wasn't any of their business since it was a personal thing, and Kyuka already had enough to worry about with what was happening with Momo. She decided to focus on the reasoning as to why they were hanging out. If Midoriya knows the place and its owner, it's gotta be good. Right, Yamamoto? Momo was nudged in the shoulder by Kyuka. I think it could be interesting to eat at such a place. I really haven't tried anything from America in quite some time. The class vice president was not happy being put on the spot. After answering, she attempted to deflect the attention towards their other classmates. And if everyone wants to go, then I see no reason not to disagree with the idea. Her response had, unfortunately, caused Kyuka to grin. Oh, looks like Yamamoto is trying her best to seem so oblivious. Man, I'm going to have so much teasing the crap out of her. While Kyuka was busy thinking about the potential future, the class vice president was trying her best to pay attention to the others as she caught a glimpse of the grin on her friend's face. In the back of her head, Momo felt a shiver crawl down her spine as she knew trouble awaited her shortly. She tried to focus on her fellow class representative as he was currently giving his thoughts. Midoriya has never proved me wrong, Ida said, growing more curious about the idea of visiting a place where they serve American. If he's willing to recommend an eatery, I saw we give the location a try. What do you guys think? Momo looked in the direction of their other classmates, Todoroki and Ochako, as neither of them has said anything. The first to say anything was Todoroki. Sounds interesting. I've never had American, so it might be something to try. The last person to speak up was Ochako, who seemed nervous for some reason. She rubbed the back of her head. I don't know if I can go. Huh? Wait, what? Ochako knew her answer was going to surprise Deku and Ida, who was probably wondering why she changed her mind. But Shoto's reaction was the most surprising. Their stoic classmate briefly tilted his head to the side before speaking. Can I talk to you, Ochako? Sure, I guess. The brunette didn't know what to say as it was unusual for Shoto to react in such an unusual way for him. Ochako watched as he walked away from the group, heading towards another bench on the path. She looked in the direction of the others, but they appeared to be just as confused as she was about what was happening. In the back of her head, Ochako was thinking the dual quirk user wanted to know why she decided on not going with them. Except, this was Shoto Todoroki. The son of Endeavor never really went out of his way to question others or try to under someone's reasoning. Everyone knew how much he preferred to not be bothered by anyone around him, even Deku. As she walked closer towards him, their other classmates didn't know what to do. Izuku, surprised at seeing Shoto acting in such a manner, was the first to say something. I think we should give them a second, he told the others, who were surprised at how mundane his reaction to what just happened. Kyuka raised an eyebrow. Dude, Todoroki has never done anything like that. The world gotta be coming to an end if you're acting calm about this. I mean, Izuku does know Todoroki the best out of everyone here. Momo tried to defend Izuku, but quickly felt a surge of embarrassment as Kyuka and Ida had turned in her direction. Yamamoto, you're not being serious, right? Ida cleared his throat. I'm inclined to agree with Jairu. Throughout the school year, Todoroki never expressed such emotions or behavior, especially towards the female members of our class. It is quite unusual to witness such a sight. Guys, Izuku caught their attention, noticing the embarrassed look on Momo's face. He's been, making an effort to change after the sports festival. P+, Uraraka, and Shoto did talk during the finals, so it's not totally strange for him to show some concern. When he revealed the part about them talking during the finals, Ida and Jairu had to realize there was some truth behind that explanation. Guess it's not impossible for him to act concerned for others, Izuku heard from Jairu, who seemed to shrug in response. Their class president had done something similar by nodding. Todoroki has been attempting to turn a new leaf. Maybe he was attempting to change Uraraka's mind. The group didn't need to wait as the sources of their conversation had returned. In the eyes of anyone, the two classmates appeared to be acting as normal as usual. Except, Izuku noticed a few little details such as Shoto looking a bit flustered, a very unusual sight, and Uraraka seemed to be smiling. He wasn't the only one as Momo glanced over at him, almost like she was asking him a silent question. Did something happen between them? Izuku didn't know what to say as he suspected whatever was happening between Uraraka and Shoto was their business. If they wanted to talk about it with him or anyone else, it was going to be their decision to let anyone know about it. I changed my mind, Uraraka said to them, poking two of her fingers together. I'm willing to go with you guys. So what did this one? Everyone watched as the purple-haired girl gestured towards Todoroki. Say here to change your mind. Izuku wanted to facepalm at that moment, learning very quickly about how willing Jairu was to push the issue if she wanted to know something. Although, he wouldn't deny a small part of him was curious as to what was said between his two closest friends. He noticed how Uraraka started to blush after referring to Shoto. He just told me it's dumb to waste an opportunity like this, especially since the training camp is coming up soon. There was only one thing Izuku could think after hearing those words. Is this what it feels like to be as transparent as a damn window? Wow, I really need a lesson from Shoto about how to be as emotionless as a Terminator. 10. Later that day. I never really imagined what sitting inside in a limousine might feel like. Izuku was only reminded about Momo's wealthy background, especially after learning it was her way of getting around the area. On the other hand, Izuku had been taking the trains for as long as he could possibly remember and, at times, even walked if the place was enough. Thankfully, he wasn't alone in thinking about their class vice president's background. Some of his other classmates had similar thoughts about her wealthy background. Ida shared his opinion. I must agree with Midoriya. I could only recall getting inside a limousine a few times, but those were mostly with my older brother. Same over here. Izuku couldn't resist from smiling when he heard Shoto speak up. My father never really was the biggest fan of these things. Izuku realized it made sense for them to have some experience with the glamorous side of being a hero in their society. For starters, Ida does come from a well-known family of heroes, but it didn't mean he can simply take a limousine to school, and his quirk made something like traveling much easier. The same could be said for Shoto as he was the son of Endeavor, the number 2 hero, and this meant Shoto had been exposed to more attention than anyone else. Even Momo. Meanwhile, the same couldn't be said for the other two inside the limousine. Izuku didn't need to guess about what Uraraka was thinking as he was aware of her family's financial struggles. Jairu, on the other hand, was a mystery. He wasn't familiar enough with the musically talented girl to say if she's gotten inside these things with Momo. The 6 students made small talk with each other as the limousine traveled through the streets of the city and followed the directions provided by Izuku. So what are everyone's plans for the summer? Izuku heard Jairu speak up. Izuku remembered about his earlier conversation with Shoto about not screwing up the opportunity to make new friends. He decided to speak up. Nothing much over here. I'm mostly going to catch up on some training and, some other stuff. Despite his best attempt, there was no denying how strange it was to answer such a question. He was the first person to say anything, but wouldn't be the only one as Ida spoke up. My family has decided to take a trip to Okinawa to see some relatives. Ida, unlike Izuku, didn't seem to struggle with answering such a question, especially since the speedster actually had stuff planned. Okinawa. Jairu was surprised to hear that. You have family from there? The speedster nodded. That's correct. Some of my mother's relatives live there. What? Just thought it was funny to meet another person who has family from there, Jairo pointed out, never expecting to learn she had something in common with the class president. She turned to others. What about you guys? Got anything planned? Izuku saw the dual quirk user shrug his shoulders. Sleep. Maybe train with Izuku or Ochako until the upcoming training camp. I don't know. Hang on for a second there. Jairo thought she was going crazy and stopped the dual quirk user from speaking anymore. I get training with Midoriya, but why Ochako? She asked him, curious as to what was going on between those two. She learned martial arts from Gunhead, and I thought it might be a good opportunity to learn from her since it might not be a bad idea to pick up some close-range moves. Shoto responded with a calm tone, despite the numerous looks he was getting from everyone. It was impressive from Izuku's point of view, especially since Uraraka was reacting very differently than Shoto. He watched as Jairo narrowed her eyes at Uraraka. That right? W what? Jairo crossed her arms over her chest and smirked. So you agreed to train with Todoroki? Yua. Everyone watched as Uraraka couldn't seem to answer the question, which was enough for the purple-haired girl to have her suspicions about what was happening. Jairo knew she had a better chance to upset All Might, the #1 hero, than actually get Todoroki to admit anything. You know what? Never mind, Jairo told the brunette, already satisfied with what she saw from her friend. Meanwhile, Momo had been relatively silent as she watched her classmates talk about their respective plans for the summer. The raven-haired girl didn't have any plans as her parents were currently dealing with some stuff at their respective jobs. Her father was working on some venture with a company from the United States. As for her mother, Momo remembered something about wanting to take advantage of the summer and open new markets. This meant Momo was pretty free for the summer until the upcoming training camp. Other than today, the raven-haired girl didn't know what she was going to do to fill time. What about Izuku? Momo heard her former partner wasn't going anywhere, nor did he have much really planned other than training. Maybe she could take this opportunity and get to know him? Or was it too much to ask such a thing? She came up with another idea, and a rather interesting one. Maybe I can get his phone number? Yeah, that's a good start. Now, Momo understood it was easier to come up with a goal to accomplish than actually going out and getting it done. Even she noticed how much Izuku tended to act nervous or anxious. Momo imagined it would cause him to freak out if a girl suddenly asked for his number, especially learning how much he puts himself down. Today was going to be important for Momo if she was serious about wanting to be friends with him. Ms. Yaoyorozu, we've arrived. Everyone heard the driver speak up, catching their attention as all of them were talking. Momo nodded. You heard what he said, and thank you again, Mr. Horikoshi. The man smiled. No problem, Ms. Yaoyorozu. 10. A few moments later, when everyone had gotten out of the limousine, the first thing greeting them was a structure that seems to resemble a train car more than anything else. Except, it had a large neon sign on top of it. Other than Izuku, nobody knew what to expect as this was going to be the first time they've ever visited such a place. It was especially strange for someone like Momo as she remembered reading something about how lots of American restaurants, more specifically diners, during the 1950s used train cars to attract their customers. She noticed the smile on Izuku's face as he turned to face them. Not what you guys expected, right? You got that right. Hyuka examined the place with a careful eye. She looked back at him. What's the story behind this place? She asked him. Izuku didn't say anything as the smile on his face became even bigger. I think we should go inside and let you guys see for yourself. Plus, I want to see your reactions. His response earned a few raised eyebrows as everyone didn't know what to expect. Momo thought he would have explained everything about the place, but he decided to let them see for themselves and experience it. This only added to Momo's curiosity about Izuku as they walked towards the diner, which seemed to be serving a few people from what she could tell. When he opened the door for them, the others walked into the place and were immediately surprised by the interior. Momo had a few initial thoughts about the place. Colorful, retro, and almost feels like I'm stepping back in time. Didn't think I was going to say something like that. The seats were made from bright red leather, neon lights throughout the place, and a checkerboard-styled floor. A few other details were the stools wrapping around the counter, pictures hanging on the walls, and everything about making it feel like a person traveled back in time. Momo wasn't expecting such designs, but they certainly have their appeal. What do you guys think? Izuku asked them, who sounded very excited from where they stood. Momo decided to voice her thoughts. I like it, personally. Some of the others agreed with her, especially Kyuka. The purple-haired girl scoffed. I think anyone would be an idiot for not thinking this place was cool. Glad to see kids are willing to appreciate the classics these days, someone said as a response to her words. Can't tell you how many times people think otherwise, miss. Mr. Lee. The others were treated to the sight of Izuku greeting, who they assumed was the owner. Izuku was talking to a man who appeared to be in older years, with a combination of black and gray hair, wore a pair of glasses, and was wearing an apron that looked like he was just in the kitchen. Besides the man's appearance, the high school students realized the older man didn't appear Japanese in the slightest bit. Been a long time, kid. The man greeted him back, speaking perfectly good Japanese, before seeing their confused expressions. I was beginning to think you forgot about me and Emily. Plus, I can see you're not alone. These guys are friends. Izuku paused for a moment as he didn't know if he could say something like that. Suddenly, he felt a hand on his shoulder and saw Shoto next to him. Yeah, we're his friends. Why? Nice to hear you're doing better, Mr. Lee told him, crossing his arms over his chest. Now, I'm sure your friends are hungry, and I hope you didn't forget about our little bet. Izuku clicked his teeth and muttered, I really hoped you forgot about it. Son, you should know to never make a bet against me. Everyone saw the smirk on the older man's face as they wondered what they were talking about. The response from Izuku had caught everyone off guard. Do you blame me for picking the 49ers over the Chiefs? Their defense was fantastic for the whole year. I thought they could handle Mahomes. Mr. Lee kept the same smirk on his face. Not my problem. They got smoked by the Chiefs' offense in the fourth quarter. I told you to never bet against someone like Mahomes, especially after the Texans. Excuse me, what are you guys talking? Momo thought Izuku was going to be a tough nut to crack, but she just got thrown a curveball. Both of them looked in their direction and said one word, football. Chapter 11. A group is born too. Oh, are referring to soccer? I enjoy the sport myself. Surprisingly, Izuku scratched his cheek in embarrassment as he shook his head. Izuku scratched his cheek in embarrassment as he shook his head at the question. Actually, we're not big fans of soccer. I, was talking about the sport from America. You know, where people wear pads and helmets and, smack into each other for about 3.5 hours. Izuku saw the various expressions on everyone's faces as they heard his answer to the question. He suspected the others were going to be asking questions about his interests. Seriously? Jairu asked him, not bothering to hide her surprise. I didn't think you enjoyed anything other than heroes. I think it's all you've ever talked about at school. I don't always talk about heroes, Izuku said, attempting to protest against her words. Unfortunately, he watched as everyone seemed to look at him with guilty expressions. Not even his two closest friends, Uraraka and Ida, didn't seem to counter Jairu's comment. Heck, Shoto agreed with Jairu on the idea of him never talking about anything but heroes. Meanwhile, Momo observed the interactions between everyone with a careful eye. Izuku was blushing as he attempted to convince the others that he did talk about things other than heroes. Ida and Ochako looked guilty as neither of them could help their green-haired friend prove his claim, which only seems to make Izuku protest even more. The class vice president noticed the amused expression on her best friend's face as Jairu seemed to be having way too much fun with the conversation. Everything about the scene in front of her was the complete opposite of what was happening at home, especially the awful relationship between her parents. Let's not go down that road, Momo. Nothing good will come out of it. The raven-haired girl decided to think about the newly learned hobby of her potential friend. She may know quite a bit from reading the vast collection of books in the library at home, but a sport like American football was definitely not mentioned in her reading material. In her brief conversation with him during the finals, Momo realized there was far more to her green-haired classmate than anyone might have imagined. To learn he enjoyed a sport like American football was quite strange if she was being honest with herself. Other than a professional league in the United States and the physical nature of the sport, Momo struggled to dig up any information she had about it. In fact, The raven-haired girl remembered hearing something from her father about how little people in Japan actually watch or enjoy the sport. I'm curious, but does your interest have anything to do with All Might? Momo couldn't resist smiling at the expression on Izuku's face as he stared at Todoroki. Izuku opened his mouth like he was going to answer it, but seemed to pause midway before closing it and remaining silent. He lightly groaned. No. Why does everyone think that? I have actually liked the sport since I was just a kid, guys. Momo giggled at his response. I believe you, Izuku. If you're willing to confront Todoroki about it, I highly doubt you're lying. Oh, you believe him. Those words had been a mistake, and Momo was going to have to pay dearly for trying to help him out. The raven-haired girl noticed the smirk on Kyuka's face and felt the sudden desire to crawl into a ball and die from embarrassment. In the corner of her eye, she saw the hopeful expression on Izuku's face and knew she couldn't backtrack on her words. Why yes, I do. Kyuka didn't lose the smirk and shrugged her shoulders. Okay, if you say so. Now, I'm sure you kids are hungry, especially if your uniforms are any indication of the days you go through. Mr. Lee caught the attention of the 6 teenagers. He gestured towards a nearby table, which was big enough to seat all of them. Why don't we get you kids settled, and I'll tell you about Izuku's fascination with good old football and how he met an old geezer such as myself. The old man told them with a smirk on his face, noticing the look of betrayal on the boy's face. He watched as the group of teenagers started taking their seats in the booth. Back in America, Mr. Lee had lived on the East Coast for quite a few years until deciding to move to Japan with his wife, Mayumi, as she's always wanted to go back to her home country to be closer to her remaining family. He had no issues with his wife's request as he knew she was concerned about her only granddaughter. From where he was standing, the old man enjoyed seeing the interactions between the teenagers as they reminded him of his friends back during his days in high school, which felt like yesterday to him. The most interesting part of their conversation was the interactions between Izuku and the pretty girl with black hair who was sitting across from him. Both of them seemed to be doing their best to prevent themselves from blushing. Yet, it was hard to miss the occasional smiles whenever they said something to each other. What do we have here? Mr. Lee thought, wondering if Izuku was hiding a secret from him. Maybe the boy finally decided to try his luck with a girl. 10. A few minutes later, Momo had experienced far too many quiet and tension-filled dinners with her parents, forced to be the barrier between her mother and father. She knew their marriage was going to fall apart. That's why she struggled to find the resolve to stay home for dinner and, for quite a few weeks, had been asking the staff to bring her food upstairs. Unless her father was home from his business trips, Momo never liked to be alone with her mother for any length of time anymore. Even if she was hesitant about the idea, Momo was glad to be hanging out with Kyuka and her other classmates. Summer had started, and it meant she was going to be forced to spend more time at home with her mother since they were on break. She needed to take advantage of every opportunity to get away from home and spend time with her friends, especially after getting a chance to talk with Izuku outside of school. There's something I actually wanted to ask you, Midoriya. Is it really as physical as people say it is? I always hear that American football is like rugby, but with pads to make things safer. When they sat down in the booth, everyone noticed how all 3 boys sat on one side, while the girls sat on the other side. Afterward, Mr. Lee had given each of them a menu to choose their meals. They thought it was going to be in English as it made sense since the place was owned by someone from America. However, they were surprised to see the menu was completely written in Japanese. Izuku explained to them about how Mr. Lee wanted to make things easier for some people, as reading a language can be tougher than speaking it. Momo stopped reading the menu after hearing Ida asked Izuku a question. The others appeared to be interested in hearing what their timid classmate had to think. Compared to American football, Momo had heard more about rugby as her father actually played quite a bit during his youth. He had friends from overseas who introduced it to him. And no offense to rugby, but I think it's safer than football, Izuku, in his usual fashion, answered quietly and politely. It's like he was trying to appease someone about to kill him for disagreeing. Ida titled his head in confusion. Why do you believe that? Cause of the people playing. Huh. Momo heard the confused tone in Kyuka's voice. Her best friend wasn't alone as the others looked at Izuku, hoping he would explain his answer. Izuku didn't say anything for a few moments, appearing as if he was thinking about his answer. He then scratched the back of his head. The best way to explain my reason is through an analogy. Imagine you are being chased down by someone as big as Shoto's dad and proceeds to get tackled by the person. All I can say is it's equivalent to being in a car crash. Nah, screw that. If that's what I would expect from some players in that league, forget about it. I deal with my dad regularly, Shoto said in a dismissive tone, refusing to ever play in a sport if there were monsters as physically built as his dad. The dual quirk user had been willing to work with his father, especially since he was the #2 hero in the country. However, there was always a sense of fear around someone as built like him. To imagine his father dishing out such force was nightmare-inducing for Shoto. Geez, you managed to scare Todoroki by using just words. Izuku was torn between laughing or feeling bad after hearing Jiraiya's comment. He saw the expression on Shoto's face. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Please tell me you weren't being serious about the comparison. Shoto wanted to believe this league wasn't filled with monsters like his dad. Izuku lightly shook his head with a smile on his face. I can name a few players who are bigger than your dad. If I'm being honest, I really wonder what people are feeding their kids to create some of the guys who play in this league. Are you saying the pads are useless? Uraraka asked, speaking for the first time in what felt like ages as the brunette had mostly been silent. No, I think they make things worse. Shoto raised an eyebrow. I thought they were meant to protect people. How can they possibly make it worse? Okay, you remember that analogy I used with your dad. That's with pads involved. Izuku watched as his friends came to the realization he had about the sport. Jesus, these guys must be built like brick houses to play. Shoto may be training to become a hero and, hopefully, reach the top of the rankings, but there was something uncomfortable with taking such force consistently. Izuku could understand his friend's reaction to learning about the level of force used in football. In fact, he wondered if the extreme willingness to take such severe blows from opponents was influenced by the games he's watched over the years. When he really put things into perspective, it made sense as to why he followed in the footsteps of his mentor. You can say that, Izuku replied to him, seemingly in an absent-minded manner. It definitely takes a level of dedication to play, especially if you want to be good. I may or may not follow players or have a favorite team. Momo saw the ever-growing smile on his face. During the school year, she always heard from Ochako about how much Izuku could talk about anything that caught his interest. Although Momo couldn't deny the strange feeling in her chest whenever she saw his smile. Izuku really does look cute whenever he does smile. To hear his enthusiasm was almost incredible. Momo never met someone like him in her entire life. I should ask him a question. But what should I ask? I did want to befriend him. At that moment, the raven-haired girl made a decision and decided to speak up, catching his attention. Izuku, I was wondering if I could ask you something. What? What did you want to ask? She noticed the various expressions across the table, but it didn't stop her from asking. Where did, your love for this sport come from? Oh. His response caught everyone's attention as he seems to be surprised by the question. Izuku remained silent, seemingly unsure of what to say to her question. This caused Momo to wonder if she stepped out of line and asked something too personal. It wouldn't be the first time she made a stupid mistake like this one. At the beginning of the school year, Momo had tried to make friends with some of her classmates and try to be friendly with as many people as possible. Her wealthy background always made things quite difficult with other students, even in the private school she attended before coming to Udata High. This school allowed her to meet people like Kyuka, Ochako, and the other girls in her class. Each of them had become dear friends in her mind, and she was hoping to make a new one in Izuku. You don't need to answer if you're not comfortable. Momo tried to take back her words and resolve the awkward atmosphere. And no, it's nothing like that. I don't mind answering the question, but Izuku's words trailed off as he glanced over in the direction of Mr. Lee. I think it would be better if he was here. Kyuka spoke up. Why? We're not going to bite you, Midoriya. There were many things Momo liked about Kyuka, from saying whatever was on her mind. Yet, there was her ability to seem relaxed in different situations, regardless of what was going on. Momo wished she could remain that calm in these moments. He, can help me explain things. Mr. Lee can definitely explain where his love for the sport came from. I'll give you guys a big hint. It has to do with a certain hero. The old man had appeared with a tray in each hand. Behind him was one of his staff, who was carrying another tray. As the teenagers were given their food, many of them had never really gotten a chance to eat American food in any capacity. The only people with experience were Momo, Ida, and Izuku. Today was the first time for the other three. After giving them a chance to settle in, Mr. Lee had removed a chair from one of the tables. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. But, Izuku was influenced by his idol. What does All Might have to do with football? Shoto asked, leaning far enough to look at his green-haired friend. Izuku finished taking a bite from his food when he heard the question. Well, I remember hearing about All Might's time in the United States. So, I got curious and started following his time there. Then I kind of saw him attend a few games for a team called the Texans. He's a fan of the Texans. Mr. Lee chuckled at the idea of All Might being a fan of such a team. Boy, he probably ain't happy about the DeAndre Hopkins trade. The ninth inheritor cringed. I think he was pretty upset if he was willing to smash a few walls. Holy shit, Gyro muttered, getting a few nods of agreement from everyone. Are you guys that into the sport? Mr. Lee laughed. Miss, I like to think if Izuku, a random kid from Japan, can become a fan, it means people are pretty passionate about it. What about you, Mr. Lee? The old man glanced in the direction of Ida. What about me, son? Ida adjusted his glasses. Do you have a favorite team? Grew up in a city on the East Coast called Philadelphia for most of my life. Mr. Lee leaned back as he thought about his younger days. If you lived in the area, it's pretty much a requirement to support the best team in the division, the Eagles, who are better than Izuku's team. They saw the smirk on the old man's face after he finished talking, but the most surprising element was the reaction from Izuku. Their classmate was usually timid and kind. Not this time, as Izuku clicked his tongue in annoyance. Why do you have to rub it in, old man? Is that a lie? Izuku glared at him. We're better than Eagles. The Cowboys are going to prove it. Rivalry? Momo asked, suspecting there must have been some history between these teams. She knew it was common for fans to defend their respective teams, especially since her father said he was a fan of American baseball or something. As much as she loved her father, Momo really struggled to understand why he, Izuku, and Mr. Lee were willing to get into these arguments. Can you guarantee that? Everyone watched as Izuku seemed ready to say something, but chose to remain silent. They wondered why he didn't say anything after declaring such a thing. Mr. Lee leaned back against the chair. Made my point, boy. Still doesn't mean anything until the season starts, Izuku muttered in defiance, refusing to believe his team is going to be worse than the Eagles. He soon noticed the stares from his classmates and worried they were getting weirded out by the football talk. Sorry if this is strange for all of you. To his surprise, Momo was the first to say anything. Don't be sorry. I think it's wonderful for you to hear you talk about something you're passionate about. Thanks. Izuku stuttered, not expecting Momo to reassure him. That, means a lot. Their moment had been cut short by Mr. Lee. I think we can save the football talk for later. Anybody want to hear about the story of how I met this super fanboy? 10. Sometime later. The students had lost track of time as they were busy acting like normal teenagers. Everyone, including Shoto, seems to be enjoying themselves. Each of them understood the heavy responsibility being placed on their shoulders as the next generation of heroes, especially as things seemed to be heading in a much darker direction than anyone could have imagined. Their class had already gotten a taste of what it's like to fight real criminals and villains, a situation that could have led to them being killed. Izuku had to remember about his upcoming training sessions with All Might. He knew there was going to be a few weeks of downtime before the upcoming training camp. It was an opportunity to improve his control over One for All, as 8% was not going to be enough to survive whatever High had prepared for them. Then, he needed to make time for Shoto, as the dual quirk user was actually serious about training and sparring with each other. It wouldn't just be him, as Shoto wanted Uraraka to work with them. Now, he wasn't going to say anything because whatever was happening between them was none of his business. In fact, Izuku was happy to see his stoic friend trying to expand his small circle of his friends. Today was only another step in the direction for both of them. After splitting the bill with everyone, Izuku and the others said their goodbyes to the old couple. Mr. Lee said they were welcome to come back to the diner. Ever since his training with All Might started, Izuku didn't have as much spare time on his hands as before. He felt bad for never stopping by and saying hello to Mr. Lee and his wife. Silently, Izuku had made a promise to visit them from time to time, especially after everything they've done for him and his mother. As the group walked towards the exit, Izuku thought about the things he learned from everyone. Shoto had a sweet tooth. Ito was a really big fan of science fiction, and Jiraiya knew quite a few musical bands from the pre-quirk era. Meanwhile, Momo and Uraraka shared a few details with the group, but they mostly remained silent throughout their time in the diner. Izuku never said anything because he can understand the difficulties of talking about personal things. Although, I didn't exactly get to talk to Momo as much as I wanted. Izuku may have learned a couple of things about the raven-haired girl, but it felt more like she was talking to everyone. His brain stopped working as it realized the implications behind those thoughts. What am I thinking? Momo doesn't have an obligation to have a conversation with just me. God, what's wrong with me? I did not think we were going to be in there for that long, Jiraiya said, getting Ida and Shoto to agree with the punk rock girl. Izuku saw her turn towards him. Midoriya, I gotta say, what else are you hiding from your classmates? We learn you're a football junkie, ballsy enough to make bets, and know some good places for food. I'm glad Yamamoto suggested this idea. Huh? I see. Izuku heard Ida speak up. Well, Ms. Yaoyorozu, I am incredibly grateful for this opportunity to spend time with my classmates. This was a good chance to relax before the upcoming training camp and the other obstacles that await us. Shoto and Uraraka agreed with the class president, who always seemed tense around everyone. Not gonna lie, I wasn't too keen about this whole thing, Shoto bluntly told everyone. If I can be honest, I don't mind doing something like this again. Would you look at that? Jiraiya crossed her arms over her chest. I think Todoroki may be coming out of his shell. Wouldn't you agree, Ochako? If there was one thing Izuku learned about the punk rock girl, she loved to tease people. Not a single person was safe from their musically talented classmate. Izuku had blushed on more than one occasion whenever Jiraiya tried to insinuate anything between him and Momo. While his friend tried to answer the question without dying of embarrassment, Izuku couldn't deny the small sense of disappointment about not really getting a chance to talk with Momo. He remembered the conversation between him and Shoto about if he wanted to hang out with her. Then there was the part of him who wanted to be friends with her. Speaking of Momo, Izuku noticed the beautiful raven-haired girl was still speaking on phone. She's been on the phone for more than 5 minutes now. He wasn't the only person, as Jiraiya seemed to glance over at Momo from time to time. Izuku wondered if there was more to the phone call than he thought, because the concern in Jiraiya's eyes was definitely worth noting. Yo! Throughout the school year, Izuku experienced a lot of different things. He fought villains, trained with All Might's mentor, battled against his toughest classmates, and partnered with Momo for the finals. As for the most recent event, he continued to think about his beautiful raven-haired classmate. The closest feeling he could remember was his small-time crush on a girl back in his first year of middle school. Midoriya? He felt someone tapping him on the shoulder. What? Dude, you realize you're staring at Yamamoto? Jiraiya whispered, pointing in the direction of her best friend. Guess I wasn't wrong about you liking her. I don't like her, Izuku whispered back, unable to hide the blush on his face. Where did you get that crazy idea from? Jiraiya snorted at his feeble attempt to convince her. Buddy, let's not play around here. I already have to deal with Ochako. I'm hoping I don't need to add you to the list. Look, Izuku was about to say something when he noticed Momo in the corner of his eye. He saw the frustration on her face, making him wonder if something is wrong. Jiraiya raised a brow. What? Midoriya, there's nothing wrong with you liking her. She saw him about to say something back, but stopped him from speaking. If I want to be honest about this whole thing, I kind of think you and her might be good for each other. Why, you're serious? The punk rock girl rolled her eyes. Midoriya, I think of Momo as a sister. I wouldn't be saying any of this stuff if I was unsure. Besides, you're probably one of the few guys in our class that any of the girls would be willing to date. To learn such information was shocking for Izuku. He looked in the direction of the others, who seemed to be engrossed in some kind of discussion. Looking back at Jiraiya, I don't know what to say. I never imagined, hearing that. Come on, Midoriya, I think you're selling yourself short here. Izuku slowly nodded, still coming to terms with that idea. I appreciate the vote of confidence. So if I, hypothetically liked Momo, what would I do? Jiraiya smiled at him. All right, let's say you hypothetically like my best friend. I only have one piece of advice for you. Just be who you are. I know it's cliché to hear that, especially coming from someone like me. You and I have never really talked to each other before today, but I like to think you would be good for her. Wow. Confidence was never Izuku's strong suit. He's been bullied, beaten, and grounded by everyone around him. Outside his mother, he struggled to find any reason to keep his dream alive. It wasn't until he met All Might did he realize his dream could still happen. Now, someone was actually encouraging him to go out with someone like Momo. If this situation happened back during the early days of the school year, Izuku might have completely shut down any possibility. As for this very moment, he really thought about the idea. Just think about it, Jiraiya told him, taking his one-word response at face value. You don't have to get on your knees and confess your love to Yamamoto. At the end of the day, we're just high school students. If it works out, I'll be happy for you guys. If it doesn't, I can't complain because things don't always work out. Izuku wanted to say something, but he was cut off. Okay, I'm back. Momo walked over towards her new group of friends. Mr. Horikoshi is running a bit late. Oh, Yaoyorozu, you didn't need to go to such lengths for us. I live not too far from this location, Ida said, feeling terrible to allow his fellow class representative to do extra work. I plan to simply walk from here. It shouldn't be more than a few minutes. He wasn't alone as Ochako spoke up. Sorry, Momo. I was going to walk home too. I live a few blocks from this part of town. Momo tried to hide the disappointment in her voice with a smile. That's perfectly fine. None of you need to be sorry. What about you two? She looked at Izuku and Todoroki, wondering what they planned on doing. I'm going to walk home. Shoto appeared to be texting someone on his phone. Not gonna lie, I doubt my dad will like seeing me getting dropped off by Yaoyorozu. Let me guess. He'll think you're training with someone else. Izuku saw Shoto rolling his eyes, which let him know he was right. Momo turned towards Izuku. Are you planning on walking home too? Sorry, he scratched the back of his head, sheepishly. I don't very far either. It's why I came here a lot as a kid with my mother. At that moment, Izuku hated the terrible feeling in his gut after seeing the brief look on her face. The others saw their classmates' reactions and decided not to say anything. Out of everyone, a certain punk rock girl and dual quirk user were interested in the development between their closest friends. Kyuka. Nah. Sis, you already know where I live. Don't need these guys to know about that. Kyuka shook her head with an amused expression, appreciating the offer. Despite the immense wealth of her best friend, the punk rock girl never really cared about it. She even walked with Ochako from time to time, especially whenever Ida or Midoriya were busy with something after class and couldn't walk with her. Secretly, Momo started to realize there was more to Kyuka's reasoning. It probably had something to do with Izuku's decision to walk like everyone else. You're going with Ochako? Momo got a nod from Kyuka. Soon, the group began to shrink as everyone started to leave. Ida said his goodbyes to the others, saying he wouldn't mind doing something like this again. Momo watched Ochako and Kyuka starting to walk away when Shoto said he would walk with them, which resulted in Kyuka teasing them. The raven-haired girl imagined the fun those two were going to experience today. When everyone was gone, this left Momo and Izuku as the last ones remaining. Today was supposed to be an opportunity to become friends. Their time as partners for the final exam had sparked something in each other. Except, neither of them knew what to do about it. They lived in a time where heroes had little time for anything but their profession. Udata High seems to reinforce such thinking as they were constantly being prepared for the harsh reality of being one. Izuku, the most devoted of his classmates, thought about the conversation between him and Jiraiya. For someone who always wanted to become a hero, he never really thought about finding love. Plus, the words from All Might surfaced in his mind. If you do feel something for her, this may be a chance to experience something pretty rare in our profession. Or, it could teach you a valuable lesson. He sighed and muttered, easy for him to say. Easy for who? His eyes widened in fear, realizing he must have said that louder than he intended. Izuku shook his head. I was thinking about Shoto. He, uh, said something to me earlier today. Oh, Momo said, unsure if she should ask about it. She didn't want to seem nosy and appear as if she poked around other people's business. Anyway, I wanted to get something off my chest. Izuku could feel his heart rate climbing fast. I had fun today. I really did. Usually, I never really hanged with other kids at my old school. So, I'm pretty happy to hear that offer from you. Izuku was learning how difficult it was to say these kinds of things to people, but kept his cool. I just want to say thank you, Momo. There's no need to thank me, Izuku. The raven-haired girl suspected she was blushing quite hard. This led to her, subconsciously, twirling her bang in moments of embarrassment. If I can be honest, I also enjoyed this chance to spend time with you and everyone else. Both teens were blushing as they tried to avoid eye contact with the other. Soon, they heard the familiar sound of a car horn. Down the street, they saw the limousine quickly approaching them. In Izuku's head, he wanted another chance to hang out with Momo. Her quiet nature during their time in the diner had sparked his interests. Izuku felt like there was more to the beautiful class vice president than what she was letting on. When the limousine came to a stop, Izuku took a deep breath and spoke up. One more thing, I was wondering if you ever wanted to hang out again. Just you and me. Really? He heard the excitement behind her response. Why yeah, it could be fun. Izuku was trying his best to stay calm because there was a chance for him to screw this up. Do you, mind if we swap our phone numbers? Izuku said, but quickly panicked when he saw the blush on her face. Only if you're comfortable. She shook her head. No, I would like that. It makes things easier, right? Right, definitely make things easier. Beneath their nervous exteriors, the two teenagers were beyond excited at what was possible. They wanted to be friends, and, without realizing it, today was just the beginning. Maybe something might come of their friendship? In their journey to become heroes, who knows what might happen?